Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 239. My name is NBZ, and I have eaten a banana this morning. That's the only thing I can think of what I did. So I woke up.
The way you described eating your banana, it was as like a replacement for walking. You were like, right, I'm not walking a ton at the moment, therefore I'm eating a banana. And I was like, I don't think you understand how walking
Look,
works.
okay, it's all health, right? It's all tied together. A banana is, although my mum, one time was like, I was eating a banana and she's like, you should be really be eating a healthier fruit. I'm like, for God's sake, well, I'm eating a fruit, all right? Like it's something,
Banana's an unhealthy fruit.
Yeah, apparently. It's just not good enough, no matter what, it's just not good enough. So, anyway.
Talking of fruit,
yeah.
So Caroline saw this on Instagram. It's like some random video, but apparently babies absolutely love it. And it's basically like this YouTube video of these fruit with like this music going. And it's almost like this hypnotic thing where they're kind of, all the fruit have like faces. And the fruit are like bobbing around. And then the banana swaps to like an apple, and then a grape, and then it swaps, and then it just keeps going. And we tried this with Bally Jr., and I've never seen him so happy looking at like a TV screen. He was absolutely loving it, and it was just like dancing fruit. I couldn't believe it.
Damn, dude. It's the simple things in life,
simple things. That's all you need, some dancing fruit and a good tune.
Look, there's a lot of that stuff out there, a lot of weird stuff on YouTube. Yeah, I'm sure you're going to have to get very careful eventually about there's some weird YouTube rabbit holes that you could go down with kids stuff. I'm sure all parental controls exist for those reasons, and you'll become very familiar with them. But that's good. Yeah. It's good to know that you're indoctrinating him to love fruit early on from a young age,
exactly.
But now the thing is, now he's going to look at the fruit and he's going to be like, well, what if that's alive? I can't eat that. That thing could dance.
I can't eat that. It's not dancing.
Right, exactly. He needs to perform for me, then I will eat it. All right, this is the rule. Fantastic. Well, hello. We're here to talk about video games and stuff. We got some cool things to discuss. A couple of announcements up the top of the show here. We're making a little bit of a change and also doing a bit of a survey thing again. So, Bally, do you want to talk about the survey that we're going to be doing?
Yes. So we are going to be doing a survey for any listeners who are willing to answer it, basically. So we last did this survey back in 2020. And the questions are basically, like how long you've been listening to the show, where did you find out about the show? We talked through some of like the Patreon stuff and things you like about the show, things you might not like about the show, and it's all anonymous. It's all in the Google form. So be as honest as you can possibly be. That is how you will help the show the most, is to just be honest. And yeah, we got a decent number of responses last time. So we're hoping that a fair few of you out there will be up for answering it. And yeah, it's going to be open for a month. So at the Monday that this show goes out on the 16th of January, that's when the survey will open, and then we will close the survey, I guess, a month later. So I guess around the 16th of February, or it might be in line with whenever that show comes out. So yeah, we'd hugely appreciate it if you could take the time to do the survey. It honestly takes about 3, 4, 5 minutes max, and it's quick. We've got a link to it in the show notes. It's on Discord. We'll put it on Twitter. So yeah, we'd hugely appreciate if you could spare us 4 minutes of your time.
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be great. And yeah, we're just looking to see if we should make more changes, different things with the show, all that sort of stuff. As we already announced at the start of this year, we're kind of changing things, though. We're doing a 2-segment show instead of a 3-segment show. And part of that also impacts our Patreon. So a change that we're making slightly is, in the past, we had the $5 tier, which we were always like, we should probably do something about that, because it wasn't great in terms of what we had said for it. We were like, you can suggest topics for the show, and then that never really materialized very much. And it just kind of wasn't a good offering. So we're making a change to that. Obviously, with now a 2-segment show as opposed to 3, it makes even less sense. So the idea is that it's now just going to be a place where we just post whatever random stuff that we decide to make or want to talk about or write or whatever. So like that could be audio, video, text, in any kind of form, and that will just pop up there onto the $5 tier. And there's no kind of consistency or schedule or frequency to that. It's just a whenever, however type of thing, which that's kind of how we're we're going to deal with at the moment. And, maybe based off this survey, things will change on that and we'll make other decisions. But I thought, given the change we made at the start of the year, it'd probably be smart to just update that and change that as well. So, you can also listen to the first thing that I made for that, which is it's like an audio thing where I go through my favorite songs of 2022 and I talk over them while listening to them.
From video games.
From video games, yes, of course. And that was good fun to make. So I put that out to everybody. But in the future, stuff like that will probably be in the $5 tier. So
right.
So that is that going forward. So excellent stuff, Bally. Looking forward to this year and the stuff we're going to do. But let's talk about this show in particular and the stuff we're going to do. What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the games that we have been playing in the first segment, and the second segment we're going to look ahead to 2023 on the Nintendo Switch. We're going to go through a bunch of games, and we've got a little bit of a Star Wars theme that we're going to continue from last year for those who are unaware. We'll get to that in the second segment.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that one. It's always good fun. But yeah, first, let's kick things off with video games. And Bally, I have been over the holiday and for past couple of weeks, I've been in and out of one game in particular. It's a game that I think is absolutely fan-fucking-tastic.
It came out end of last year on Game Pass?
So it came out on everything. It's on Switch, it's on, I think, PlayStation and Xbox, and it is called Chained Echoes. It is a JRPG. It is in the style of Super Nintendo classics, pixel art style, top-down, and I think this thing is... You know how we're very excited for Sea of Stars, and Sea of Stars is like, it's like Chrono Trigger and stuff, like, we're hoping it's going to be good. Well, Sea of Stars has a run for its money right now, because Chained Echoes is coming in here, and it's like, listen, everybody, I am taking the indie crown for the best RPG from this space, and no one is going to challenge me. And so I'm going to say 15 hours or so in. So I still have a lot to go. I know that people are putting like 40 hours into this thing. It depends how much side stuff you do, all that sort of stuff. But I, so far, am absolutely loving the experience. And I think that there's a lot of reasons for that. The way I kind of describe it is Chained Echoes basically looked at the JRPG genre and were like, okay, what if we didn't do any of this bullshit? What if we just did stuff that was good and that is modern and makes sense in the year 2023? And it is such a sublime experience from a playability standpoint, right? Stuff I'm talking about is things like, in a regular RPG, you go into a fight and it's like, I want to run away from this fight because I messed up, or, I don't want to fight it because it's a random encounter. So first of all, there's no random encounters, so it's just like Chrono Trigger. Enemies appear on the map and you kind of like jump into a battle with them, but you can run from any fight without consequence. No matter what, you can just run. It's fine. The thing that pairs with that is that after every single fight, you automatically heal all your health and all of your magic points straight away. Don't need to worry about that at all.
That's nice.
So there's situations I've been in where I go into a fight and I kind of mess up the first turn by not doing the correct thing, and I'm like, well, I could keep going, or I could just run and just go back to the start of the fight again. And I've done that multiple times in this game because it's so easy to do, and because of that, it means that you can really focus on just doing the maximum damage and like being as efficient as possible. It basically makes every regular fight with enemies interesting, because I think one of the pitfalls of RPGs is that you have this limited pool of magic and health, and you have items that can restore it, and oftentimes I tend to be very stingy with that stuff because I'm like, I don't want to spend more money on potions, or
you don't know how long the dungeon you're in is going to be.
Exactly. So there's like this hesitation, there's this apprehension that you have with regular RPGs, right? And it means that you tend to not use all your magic as efficiently as you want to. You basically like hold back, and you're like, well, I could just do a regular attack here that doesn't cost me anything and is going to do damage. I'll do that. And by removing that entire idea, Chained Echoes is like, no, you can go all out. And the thing is, the entire combat system is based around going all out. And I'll maybe get into it in a minute, but a couple of other things that are really cool about this. So leveling up is a little bit Chrono Cross inspired, in the sense that you level up based on every time you've beat a boss, you get a star, and that star can then be spent on upgrades for every character. So every character gets this when you beat a boss, and then you can spend it on either an upgrade that's a new move, so a new ability that you can use in battle, or you can increase one of your stats, or you can use it to give yourself a passive ability. Like one of the characters gets an ability called Zombie Killer, which means that they do additional damage against zombies, that sort of thing. So you can spend these stars on any of those, and it has this tree basically that once you have spent enough on enough abilities, it will then open up the next part of it, so you can continue down and get more abilities and stuff like that. And I haven't hit the point yet where I've had to make those decisions of like, oh, what skills do I want to keep on my character, which ones do I want to get rid of, but there is going to be that element coming up where, you know, I have 6 slots, I think, for different skills I can use, and eventually I'm going to have more than 6, and I'm going to have to make a decision of like, okay, which ones do I want to keep, which ones do I want to switch out. The other thing is that this game has a system in combat where I guess I didn't think about this before, but the characters are essentially chained together. I don't know if the name Chained Echoes like means anything else, but like you can basically put them in a formation. So one character is on the field, the other one is kind of attached to them, but they can swap in whenever you want, essentially. So when it gets to that character's turn, you can say, okay, I'm just going to swap into the other character. Now, usually what happens in RPGs is if you want to swap in a character, that wastes the entire turn, right? Like Pokemon, right? If you're swapping someone in, it wastes the turn, and you have to take a hit or whatever. In Chained Echoes, they're like, nope, doesn't waste a turn. You can switch them in and you can act with them on the same turn. So it's like, it's super flexible. It basically means that you have effectively, instead of 4 party members, you effectively have 8 party members all at once, all accessible at the same time, because you can just swap them whenever you need to. And that is such a fluid and like nice system, and it also makes you feel like you are actually using the entirety of your party. Like what tends to be the case in these games is you will find a group of characters that you like and you will just stick with them, right? Like in Final Fantasy VI, I was like, I have Celis on my team, I have Terra on my team, I have Sabin, and I can't remember who else, like Cyan maybe. That was like the team I had. And Final Fantasy VI does actually kind of force you into using the other characters, especially at the end of the game, whether you split you into like 3 parties, and you do have to have like good levels with all of them. So maybe that's an exception in some senses, but also for the majority of that game, especially in the back half, I was really just using one main party, right? And then you have to worry about like spreading the XP around. It's the whole Octopath Traveler thing of like making sure that everyone has enough experience so that they can level up and, you know, feel like they can actually take part. And this game has like an additional layer of that where, okay, so you get the stars for beating bosses, but then you also get regular experience, which you then use to level up your abilities. So, you know, one of the characters, Sienna, she's my favorite character in combat. She is like a kind of samurai. She has like a very long sword, and she does very, very powerful moves. And so one of her moves is called Yokogiri, and it hits everyone, and it has a high chance of critical hitting people. And so like what I could do is I could go to that move specifically and say, okay, all the SP that I've gained fighting regular enemies, like that kind of all adds up, and I have like 150 of it. So I can spend that 150 and level up that one specific move, which means that move, when I use it in combat, now does more damage and has higher crit chance or whatever, right? So each individual move can then be leveled up, which is nice, and it gives you an incentive to actually fight the regular enemies, because you could imagine a situation, right, where, you know, if they're only giving you XP for fighting bosses, it almost makes fighting the regular enemies trivial. And Chrono Cross kind of feels like that in a sense, because, like, you know, you can find regular enemies and fight them, but it almost is pointless because you don't get XP. You get like some minor stat boosts after fighting a boss from doing them. But in this game, it's like, no, we actually have a reason for you to do that as well. So it's seen those problems with previous games and like, okay, let's like address all of this stuff, right? And I think just from a playability standpoint, the thing for me, as you always know, that I love the most is, can I move quickly? And, you know, RPGs are known for slow movement, like only in a grid, like you're just gonna
get your bike.
You can get your bike, or you can get your running shoes.
Something.
I think Final Fantasy VI, you do have to equip running shoes, don't you, on your main party member? And
God,
yeah, you do. It's like one of your talisman slots or whatever. Yeah. And Chained Echoes is like, fuck you, how about we run everywhere, and it's like super fast. Like the movement in this game, and I know this is a weird thing to talk about in an RPG, but the movement in this game feels so good. Like I just love the running around in Chained Echoes is fucking top tier. It feels really nice, and the spaces are designed in a way where they don't feel overwhelmed in terms of exploration. Like you can open the map up, and the map is very good at kind of showing you the spaces you can get to. but it also feels like there's this sense of exploration. There's a sense of like finding treasure chests and finding hidden places that, you know, are hidden behind the environment. But also, it doesn't overwhelm you with enemies, right? Every fight feels important, and every fight feels like it's been designed in a certain way of like, okay, we'll introduce this enemy, then we're going to introduce this other enemy, now we're going to put them together, now we're going to put them together with multiple of them, right? Like every fight feels like it's building and building and building within each area so that you're introduced to an enemy, you learn how to fight them, and then it just kind of ramps up. And that it's never overwhelming. They only give you like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 fights in an area, so you never feel fatigued or tired or like you know, just done with a set of enemies or an area, because it's so breezy to get through. And there's lots of kind of spaces so far. It's kind of overwhelming, the fact that one person developed this game. Obviously, like, they had help with contractors, but Matthias Linde is kind of the solo developer behind this, and from what I've heard, there's like even more stuff coming from a combat perspective. Like at the start of the game, you have these mechs that you're fighting in. It's kind of like a, you know, it's like one of those preview things at the beginning where you get depowered. It's like Metroid Prime, right? You have all your abilities, then you get. I was
going to ask, like, what's the setting? It's not traditional fantasy then. It's quite
it kind
steampunky.
Of is. It's kind of a blend of steampunk, but there's definitely a traditional fantasy feel to it.
A bit like Final Fantasy VI.
I would say, yeah, it's somewhat adjacent to that, but it definitely has its own identity, right? Like, it feels like it's created its own world very well, but all the cities feel like, you know, medieval in a sense. Like, there's a castle and there's like villagers and townsfolk, and it feels like a pre-urban, like pre-industrial society, right, in a lot of senses. But I've only been to a couple of towns so far. One of the towns I just got to has like these big waterfalls that kind of come down the center and stuff like that. And, you know, there's definitely like cutscenes that are set where you're like on top of a building at night and there's like a big moon in the sky and you can see like off in the distance. And, you know, at the beginning of the game, they show the first town you're in, and they have this big kind of zoom out, kind of huge pixel art tableau of the castle in the background. It looks fantastic. Like, they get across a sense of place, even though it is a, you know, top-down 2D world, very effectively. But I would say, you know, the fantasy setting is very much its own thing, has its own identity, but still has those familiar kind of feelings to it. But it does a twist on it, right? Like, the area I've just gotten to is called, I think it's like the Petla flower fields, right? So you, in your head, you have like an idea what flower fields are, but it's like a swamp that's like very white and has this kind of like ashen look to it, right? So it calls it one thing, but then it has like a visual twist on it, which I think is very cool. So it stands out in that way, definitely. And every area I've got to is very unique.
What's the story like?
It's pretty good so far. I will say that the one weakness of this game, I will say, is the writing. It feels either the localization isn't quite there, because I believe the developer is German, or it was written, you know, from him not natively in English,
right.
In a way that almost does evoke those old games. Like, you almost are like, oh yeah, this does feel like a Super Nintendo game, because the writing isn't quite there. But I think it's quite complex. It feels... So, you know, in games like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, I think Final Fantasy VI particularly, they introduce a character and then they, you know, have this kind of big wall of text explaining who they are and their background, and kind of like the lights go out and it kind of centers on them for a moment. So it does that. But there are lots of warring factions. The game essentially starts off with this war that's happening, and you're going into the fray, and you're in these robots and everything, and you get to the center, and your character, you know, fights a boss and then tries to destroy this stone, this kind of shining gem in the middle. And what it does basically is it sets off a nuclear explosion, which destroys like the entire surrounding city, kills everybody except for these two characters who are very close proximity to it, because this, for whatever reason, this stone will destroy everything, but anyone who's very close to it will survive. So it creates this almost like genocide, like straight off the bat, and that basically is an event that ends a war that has gone on for like 100 years. So there's a huge war across the continent that's happened for 100 years, and that event kind of like stops it. And then you pick up a year later with different characters, and you kind of like go through, you know, what's happened in the aftermath of that, essentially, and basically tensions rising for another war to start again, basically. So you are a kind of a set of disparate characters. You have a character called Len, who's the princess of the Northern Kingdom, but she's kind of undercover. Like, she's basically gone out to like see the world and like what people really live like and that sort of stuff. Her and her retainer Rob are both like party members. Sienna, who's like she's a thief, essentially. She's like kind of just out for herself, but then ends up, winding up with you because of, stuff that align in terms of goals and those types of things. And you have, lots of various different party members. At the moment I have, I think, 7 total maybe, so I'm almost at a maximum of 8, and apparently you get a lot more as the game goes through, so it's not just capping out at that. You can switch people in and out, which I've heard like it tends to be, that may be where later on in the game you are sticking a bit more to one single party, because if they keep adding characters, it gets harder to manage all that stuff and keep swapping them in. But it is easy to do that because, as I've said, everyone levels up together, so it feels in keeping essentially with, you don't have to worry about it, and everyone is usable essentially because everyone keeps pace with the rest of the party, so it's all kind of balanced out in that sense. But yeah, I think I'm intrigued by the plot so far. I'm not like super invested in the sense that there are a lot of names of places and people, and there is a map that they show you at the beginning, but I feel like I need to go on a wiki and like look up, okay, they reference this place, is this what the place I think it is, are we going in this direction? Like, there are just some names I think they throw a lot of characters at you, and they do the cutaways to like, here are some politicians talking, here's the king and here's the pope and all these people, and like it does a lot of that stuff to the point where I'm like, okay, probably on like a subsequent playthrough of this game I would understand it a lot better because I would have the context for all these people. But when they throw them at you first time, it's a little bit tricky to keep up, but I still enjoy it, and I think it's ambitious in the sense that it's using a lot of different characters, obviously playable ones, but also NPCs and stuff that have their own motivations and villains and all that sort of stuff. I think it's very, very interesting. So yeah, I haven't talked too much about the battle system specifically, but I think that is the thing that a lot of people have kind of glommed onto, and I think it's the thing that makes it so interesting. So basically, I've already said that you have these 4 party members and you can switch them out with other ones, you kind of chain together. The way the battle system works is you have this bar at the top, right? This bar is called the overdrive bar. And essentially, there's this orange meter at the bottom, there's this big green section in the middle, which is the biggest section, and there's a tiny little red section at the end. And the idea is that every time you attack, there's a little needle on the bar that moves up, right? And it moves up the bar. And what you want to do is you want to get into the green section because that initiates overdrive. Overdrive basically means that you do more damage to enemies and you take less damage. So you basically want to be in overdrive at all times. However, every time you attack an enemy, the needle slowly moves upwards, and if it crosses into the red at the very top, that's when you start taking way more damage and enemies start doing way more damage. So it's dangerous and you don't want to be in the red. So basically you have to do stuff that mitigates that needle and keeps pushing it back into the green. So you can move it forward, but if you're getting too close, you want to make sure it's moving back. And the way you do that is that each move has a kind of like icon associated with it, depending on what type of move it is. So like moves that are based around healing, so either healing your TP or your HP, or healing certain other aspects of your character, those have a kind of green icon, and moves that do poison damage or like extend status effects have like this weird purple icon next to it. So what will happen is at the overdrive bar, it also shows one of those icons, and whatever icon it is showing, if you use a move that has that same icon, it will move the bar down. So basically you can do your regular attacks and you can keep doing a lot of damage, but you want to always keep an eye on what icon is on the bar, because you have to use that to kind of push the bar back down into the green, because if you go into the red, it's really fucking hard. Like the enemies
just this unique way of limiting powerful moves, basically.
Yeah,
like,
pretty much.
pretty good,
and
yeah.
It's really, really cool, and it makes it, again, as I'm talking, like regular fights are interesting, and part of that is because of this reason, right? Is the overdrive bar. It's similar to like when you're first starting the fight, you want to be careful to not use those moves on the icon, because then that will move you back to the orange, and that's also out of range of the green bar, right? You won't take as much damage as in the red, but you will still take more. So sometimes it'll be like, oh, I want to use this move, but I kind of have to use another move. Like there are certain moves, like, so Sienna has a pilfer move, which is basically stealing stuff. And sometimes you'll be like, well, I don't need to steal anything, I don't want to, but it will lower the overdrive bar if I do this, so I'm going to do it this turn just to do that, to put myself in better stead for the next turn. And yeah, just the balancing act of that and just making sure that it all works is really hard, but also I think is so satisfying once you get your head around it and once you're understanding like the cadence of these fights and how they work. And there are so many like types of moves that in boss fights become way more effective, like moves that increase your whole party's, offensive capabilities and stuff like that. The other thing is like all these status effects are very useful in even big fights, right? Like there are so many RPGs where you're like, well, I don't know, I'll try and poison the boss, but it's not going to work, it's ineffective, they're immune to it, whatever. And that's always frustrated me about RPGs, is like, well, you have these characters who do status moves, and then you get to boss fights where it's like, no, it just resists every status move. And it's like, well, that just kind of kills any strategy that I have, right? And here, that's not the case. You can do any status move on anybody and it will work regardless, right? But it will limit you. So again, Sienna, can you tell? She's my favorite character. So she has a move called Blind something. It basically blinds enemies, right? And essentially, you can only use it once in a fight. So say you come across like 4 pig enemies at the same time, and you're like, well, they're all going to attack me at once, and it's going to do a bunch of damage. So how about I use blind on them, and then those 4 attacks just miss for the first 4 turns, but then they lose their blindness after doing it once, and then you can't do that for the rest of the fight. So you can only blind them once, and it's like a tactical thing of like, when do I want to blind them? When do I want to make sure I'm using the status effect? Because it's very tactically beneficial, right? And the same with stuff like poison and with, defense lowering stuff. You can put poison on somebody, and even if they're still poisoned and you use a poison move again, it will automatically extend the poison, right? So there's it shows you, when you're attacking an enemy, it shows you how many turns are left for each status effect, right? Either positive on their side.
That reminds me of like Slay the Spire or something, actually.
Yeah, totally.
Stack on that.
Yeah, there is stacking in that sense. And you're able at every point in time in the battle to see how many turns you have left on your status attacks or your like buffs to yourself, but also on enemy buffs and debuffs, right? So it's great to be like, oh, I've only got 1 more turn on HP regen left, so I need to use Victor to use HP regen again so that all my characters automatically heal. And healing is a tough balance because I've only got 1 main healer at the moment, and they have a class emblem which gives them access to a few more abilities, so that class emblem allows him to heal the whole party, but getting healing otherwise is a matter of like, you have to use an item, right? Like, and that's the other thing, is like, you don't use items outside of battle because everyone's always healed outside of battle, so you have to use items within the fights themselves, which makes them actually far more valuable and useful. And I actually have been using them a lot more than I would in regular RPGs, because sometimes you are in a bit of a rut and you're like, oh, I need to get out. I don't have any way to heal anybody, like I'm right near the edge of the overdrive bar, and if I use a heal, it'll put me into red, so I just need to use an item, right? And there are other ways to kind of mitigate the bar. If you defend with a character, that will slightly move it down a bit, but also when the enemy attacks you, it will slightly move it up for your side. So there's a fine balance to strike here, and I think it just makes it so engaging. There's also like boss fights that are so creative and awesome. Like there's one where I was on essentially a minecart going through this kind of underground area, and you're fighting a boss while this minecart is moving, but you also have access to the controls of the minecart, and so you can press the trigger button and it pulls up a map of the kind of area you're going through, and there are different areas where you can switch. You can hit a switch on the minecart and it will change the direction your cart is going. So you can look at the icon. There are different icons on the map. One is like a heart, one is like a poison thing, one is like a big rock that will fall on you and do damage, and one of them is a skull. And if you go into the skull, you just automatically die, basically. So you are basically balancing fighting this boss while also paying attention to what route you're on the minecart, and in the top corner, you can see the turn order, right? So you can see which character is coming up when. And there will be a part of the turn order that is like, this is when the minecart is going to shift to a new direction, or when it's going to move to a new screen, essentially. So you stay on one screen for a while, and then it will move to a new screen, and depending on what direction you have set the minecart to go in, it will go in that direction. And I fought this guy a couple of times, and I was so involved in the boss fight that I forgot to change it once, and I died twice by just going into a pit, essentially, accidentally. So you really need to focus and be like, okay, well, one of my characters this turn, they can't heal or they can't attack. Their move has to be hitting the switch on the minecart to change the direction that it goes in. And it's just such a cool idea. It's really unique and different, and not really like any kind of thing I've seen in a JRPG before. This game is wildly creative in so many aspects, and the combat system is an element that kind of like shines above all else, but I think generally, from an overall standpoint, from everything going on with Chained Echoes, it's remarkable. And every time I sit down with it to play it, I'm like, why am I playing any other game right now, right? Like, it really has captured me in that sense. And yeah, I love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
You've given me the fear, because now I know that the next traditional JRPG you're going to play is probably going to be Octopath Traveler 2.
That's
and
true,
I'm worried
yeah.
you're going to juxtapose the two.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Octopath Traveler 2 is going to be doing all these traditional things that are going to grate on you now, having played Chained Echoes.
Yeah, it honestly feels like it feels like I've been constrained for so long, and now I'm like, oh, I can breathe again. You know, that's what Chained Echoes feels like. It's like, oh wow, I can really just fully enjoy an RPG without compromise. And I think that's the thing for me that makes it stand out above so many other games that I've played in this genre is there is an adherence to tradition that this genre just like loves, right? It's like Nintendo in a lot of aspects, like Lives in Mario. Like there are things
like Japan.
It's like Japan, right? Like, and it's like, as I was talking about the Nintendo show, I talked about Yakuza Like a Dragon, and like how that game is like, well, what if we did all this bullshit that Dragon Quest did in the 1980s? You know?
They added in the JRPG bullshit to a game that wasn't a JRPG.
Right, they're like, oh, what about we have this revive move that only revives you 50% of the time, lol, you know, that sort of shit. And Chained Echoes is like, nah, mate, nah, we're in a new era. Look, this is the year 2023, all right? And we're doing things different, and it's going to be like that, okay? So
is the JRPG era over, and we are now into the European RPG?
Oh, sure, yeah.
There we go.
The European influenced JRPG.
We're taking over.
I certainly hope so. I mean, I certainly hope that a lot of games take cues from what this is doing. And it's like, the thing is, what it's doing is not really that hard or revolutionary. It's just like...
No, exactly.
It's just pushing against things that people have just like almost Stockholm syndromed themselves into thinking like, well, this is just how it is, you know? And this game is like, nah, it's not.
Has there been any part of the discourse with this game of the more traditional JRPG fans who push back more against the stuff you're saying about item use in dungeons?
Right.
They might like that pressure of not knowing how long a dungeon is and balancing healing with magic with meters, you know?
I totally get that. I haven't heard it, if I'm honest. All I've heard is effusive praise from everyone who's played it, basically. So
I mean, sitting on a 90 on OpenCritic, which for any indie game is an absolute amazing score, honestly.
Yeah, and it really deserves it, honestly. And the thing is, here's the thing, I'll probably talk about this next time as well, because I still haven't got to, you know, the mech stuff, which I know is coming, which apparently changes the combat up even more. And, you know, there's a lot more for me to experience in this game. So, yeah, I'm only about 15 hours in, and I think it's phenomenal so far, and yeah, I don't mind that it's going to be 40 hours, maybe a bit more than that, because I do want to do, like, all the side quests so far have been very short and easy to do. Like, they don't take much time or pressure, and like exploring around the spaces is great. Like, you look up at a spot and you're like, oh, there's a treasure chest up there, how do I get up there? And you find like a secret hidden path to get up there, and like, it just has all the elements that I like in these types of games. And also the music is really good. The music has big Xenoblade vibes, frankly, which is probably the biggest compliment I can give any soundtrack. And I think so far it's got a lot of great stuff in there, and yeah, has fit the vibe extremely well. So yeah, I can only say positive things about Chained Echoes, and I think, you know, it's on Switch, it runs very well on Switch, but, you know, you can play it through Game Pass, you can play it on other platforms.
Game Pass PC?
Yes, yeah, I would, frankly, I would prefer to be playing this on Switch. Honestly, it is one of those games where I would have put 35 hours into this if it was on Switch, but it's not, so I haven't. So, yeah. In any case, I think the game is brilliant, and everyone should check it out, even if you have a passing interest in RPGs.
I should add it to my long list of
your
games
long eventual to get to
play.
List, sure. Yeah.
But I will get there.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Fantastic.
Well, from a great game to a less great game, you might say.
Here we go.
I finished up Sports Story.
You did.
It sounds like very few people on the internet have suffered the same fate as I. Who've reached the end of this game, and as you can tell by my tone, I'm not too happy with where the game eventually went. And yeah, I think I've honestly never been more disappointed in a game.
Oh no!
And what I mean by that is that the level of hope, the distance between the hope that I had for a game and the reality of the outcome of what that game ended up being, I've never felt a greater distance than what I feel with Sports Story. And you know, to start with the good points, I think that the golf still feels very good, and some of the best parts in the game were actually, I think the part you dropped off at was actually the part I maybe enjoyed the most in the game, which was like
Okay.
Royal Golf Challenge. And
Right.
but ultimately there's just not enough golf in there, and as good as the golf mechanics are, they're not that different from the first game, and I feel like the first game had a much better balance of the amount of golf mechanics you have. And
Yeah, I don't know that your complaint would have been as valid had the other sports lived up to what they could have been as full sports, but the fact that they aren't means that you're still relying on the golf to carry things, but the game is like, no, we have these other things.
Exactly.
And it doesn't afford them the same weight and or like complexity, which makes it feel hollow in a sense.
If the game had just given golf a hell of a lot more weight with the knowledge that the other sports were so like empty and, you know, unfulfilling, then yeah, maybe this game would have felt a little stronger for me. But ultimately, like the glitches, the bugs, the game crashed on me like 4, 5, 6 times. The saving the checkpoints isn't great. The mission structure, like in your like mission log, it's not always up to date with whether you've actually beaten the little mission or not, and the order of which missions you do and when, it's not great. And that's not even to mention like there's no coherence to like the story or the world or like the geography of the world. So what I mean by this is, and spoilers for this game, I guess, if you're really obsessed with locations and things, but there are like clearly locations in the game beyond the end game that they just never get to, and it makes it more clear in my eyes than ever that like this is a very unfinished game. On top of the fact that, you know, they're building up Pure Strike as this kind of like the capitalist corporate people taking over sport, and ultimately you're kind of linking up the queen of the world. And everything's pointing towards you and the queen basically taking on Pure Strike. And she actually says stuff along the lines of, yeah, we're going to take them on, we're going to do this, and you get to the point at which you've fulfilled everything the queen wants of you, and then you're like, right, now we're going to take on Pure Strike. And she's like, yeah, I guess we could maybe, I don't know, we don't need to take them on anymore. And there's some line like that at the very end of the game. You then do like a little golf challenge, and then that's the end of the game. And it's like, wow.
What?
I was left like on the floor, like in pain, honestly. I was just like, this is the most upsetting ending, where there's clearly like 2 or 3 chapters just missing from the end of the game. It is truly awful. And
wow,
yes, I would have been up for limping along for 2 or 3 more chapters, but
see, honestly, that's a mercy that it ended where it did for me.
yeah, part of me was like, oh well, at least it's done, that's the credits. And this this is like, not the golf story had a good story necessarily, but like, and I do still think
it was charming, and it had like a coherence to it. Like
there's
there
a
was
coherence.
At least,
yeah. And the writing is still pretty good in this game, I'll give it that. But there is still a build with your coach and the corporation and the queen, and it all just falls so flat on its face. The final challenge again, like it's not even a course. It's like 10 challenges, and the joke is that like you can tell where they were going, because the idea is that the final challenge is 10 sports.
Oh, okay.
You're not actually playing 10 sports. They're shoehorning golf into 10 sports. So a bit like the cricket, you do a bit of bowling where you're hitting a golf ball to bowl.
Yeah.
They replicate that across different sports, but ultimately most of those sports are still you aiming at a green. And then there's like all these weird animal, how do I even describe it? Large, colorful animals that are like spirits that just kind of float around these challenges, and it's truly bizarre. It looks rushed, it looks ill thought through, and yeah, I'm actually speechless at like how bad it all felt by the end. And
what a shame.
Yeah, from a trailer that promised so much, and you know, sports that ultimately felt awful. I mean, I think the next best sport was tennis, and it still felt really, really bad. Like, but there was progression. There was like an academy. I actually kind of enjoyed that area. Like it
was all right. Like I don't think we talked about the tennis last time, right? I don't think we'd both gotten too deep into it.
No.
But for me, the biggest problem with tennis was like I couldn't, at least I never figured out a way to aim the direction my ball went in. And it seemed like the only way to get your tennis ball to go in a direction was for it to come from that direction in the first place, right? There are so many challenges where you have to hit a ball into a circle, and it's like, well, this one came from the left and I need to hit it to the right. It's just it's literally impossible for me to do that, so I might as well just leave that ball. There's no point in hitting it. Even the first challenge you do in tennis must have taken me like 15 minutes to do. It's so fucking hard. I'm like, how, like, it's just such a weird, bizarre
Really
on-ramp. And yeah, like some of the matches that you have were all right, but they last barely any time. They're like one game essentially, and then it's over, and you don't get to do much more beyond that. And then the rest of the tennis academy is you and this other kid running around like trying to find clues for some reason, and it's just a lot of it is very messy, despite like some of the charm of the areas, and like I like the look of the academy and stuff like that, but the middle of that, actually, one of the things that I was like, okay, surely this is like a side thing, because when you're at the academy, there's a bunch of characters with that icon over their head, which is just like two arrows twisting, which is like you can trade with them. I was like, oh, this must be a side thing that I can engage with if I want to. Nope. Turns out that when you get to a certain point, you have to get these balloons, and the girl's like, oh, okay, I need this, so you need to go get that. I'm like, oh, I need to go in Link's Awakening, this entire thing that I thought I could ignore. No, it's part of the main thing now. I think that's kind of emblematic of the problems with this game, is main stuff that feels like it should have been side stuff.
Yeah. If it was just playing like these glitchy, strange sports constantly, there's kind of like a quirky charm to it. Like I did enjoy the tiny bit of cricket that was in like one of the areas. Like I enjoyed that. And the tennis, through all its faults, like I was prepared to like put the faults to the side, because, and I was saying this to you off mic, but like there's so few sports RPGs out there. Sometimes it feels that I was having a good time almost with like the first 3-4 hours of the game, because ultimately there's not really many other places I can get a similar experience. Like there was stuff like Dodgeball Academia the other year that I really enjoyed, and obviously Golf Story, but like these types of sports RPGs aren't too common, and I was giving the game a lot of probably false credit as a result for that. And then very quickly back to the tennis. So I played quite a bit of tennis growing up, and for those who play tennis, you'll know, or who watch tennis, you'll know that there's an ad court and a juice court. So juice court, if you're right-handed, you're serving right to left, and ad court, if you're right-handed, you're serving left to right, like on alternate points. They got them the wrong way around in this game. Like you start on the ad court. It drove me absolutely bananas. Like I couldn't believe like such a simple core part of tennis that they were just completely messing up. And it doesn't take long to understand that like at the start of a game you serve from the juice court, and from the second point in the game you serve from the ad court. It just felt so bizarre. Honestly, in the grand scheme of things, that's an incredibly small point. But it drove me nuts after the long list of things that I'm already moaning about. So yeah, if this game was glitch-free, bug-free, knew what was good about the game, like I said, the golf, and just a bit more effort was put into the variety in sports, a bit like the trailer implies, then I think this game would have been at least okay. But like the way that everything just seems to fall flat on its face, that you're left with like a little bit of golf and a little bit of writing that's pretty good, and for me everything else just feels like a mess, honestly. And yeah, it's a real shame. Like this game has come in hot, and obviously we've been waiting on this game for quite a long time. I think the original trailer was like 2-3 years ago, I want to say.
Yeah, it was a while back. Yeah. Sure.
So yeah, it just reminds us all again that like games need to come out working for them to be enjoyable. And this game is bad beyond just its bugs. There's structurally so much to it that is completely lacking compared to the first game especially, and it's a real shame. If I were them, I'd just focus on a single sport and go with that, and focus all the time that it took to get those golf mechanics feeling good. That energy, if that was spent on cricket or tennis, I think you've got a decent game. And I think also the expectation from the trailer was, we're going to play lots of sports. That sounds fun. and you spend so little time in this game actually doing anything sport related. And that's a real shame, because I feel like the first game, you would constantly be doing like little golf challenges, can you get this ball up into there, and can you get this over there, and like, okay, I'll help you do that. And then at the end of each area, there was like an 18-hole golf course, and I don't really mind them cutting from 18 holes to 9 holes. That's fine, but it didn't feel like, yes, each area does have a 9-hole golf course that you inevitably do play at some point, but it still felt very tacked on and optional, whereas I'd like it just to be a bit more bread and butter. And yeah. I'm diving into the minutiae of what I'd like to see, when ultimately it's far worse than that.
Yeah.
Like it's a real shame, and I can't think of the last game I've been this negative about on the podcast. But yeah, and I'm rarely in a position where I'm buying a game day one without looking at reviews, and that's obviously going to happen for a game like Sports Story. But yeah,
right.
it's not good.
No, it's not. It's really not, and that's why I bailed on it. I got to a point, as you were mentioning, like the Queen's golf course thing, and I went through that section, and I was like, okay, I just get through this, and they're like, no, you need to get some birdies, and I was like, that was the point. I was like, am I enjoying this? Why am I playing this?
Yeah.
What is the point? Am I going to get anything out of? I've played this for 10 hours already. Is there any reason for me to continue? And I just sat there and I was like, nope. So I closed it, and I did what Jeff Grubb did. I uninstalled it from my Switch, and I never looked back. And it's hard to do. I find from our perspective, we want to finish games often.
I for my sins, I was not gonna not finish this game. Like I wanted to see the end, and you know what? The end was so bad. I'm glad I saw it, kind of thing. Like it was that shocking. And honestly, you missed probably the worst. Not the worst. I don't know. Was it the worst area? You missed a bad area in the end game that is incredibly fetch questy and incredibly get this thing, take it to them. Must have been like 20 times, and then
wow.
And then you do the end game. You speak to the Queen, and then you do the end game 10 challenge, and then the credits roll. And I was just left, as I said, like in a heap on the floor. Like what was that? Are you kidding me? So yeah, I think you bowed out at the right time.
Okay, cool. I'm
glad. I suffered the end game, so you didn't have to.
Well, that's good. You can tell people about it, so appreciate it.
Yeah,
and,
if you're playing this game and have a good time, all respect to you, but
sure,
it's not. Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, I can't.
It's not there.
I'm speechless.
It's not there.
I have no words.
All right. Well, the game that I played to kind of cleanse myself of Sports Story was a nice.
I used Elden Ring to cleanse myself. By the way, and it felt good. But
yeah, totally. So I played a nice, colourful platformer.
Yes.
So there's a game called Grapple Dog that came out, I think, last year, actually. And I had seen it at a couple of events last year. And, it's one of those games that I had looked at from a publishing perspective. And the sad reality about it is that colourful 2D platformers just don't sell very well generally. At least on PC, they don't sell very well. But I love playing them. So I'm in this weird position when I'm, doing my job where I'm like, I would love to play that. It's not going to make any money, so we can't sign it, basically. But, I wanted to, play it and enjoy it myself. So I did, and I bought it on Switch. I think this game is very neat. It's very cool. It's longer than you would expect for a platformer. It feels like the levels they kind of take like 20 minutes sometimes to get through. So they're a bit
20 minutes for a 2D platformer.
Yeah, they're a bit more exploratory as levels. Basically, this game does have a lot of stuff which I think usually annoys me. But I think that I was able to, I don't know, so I've got stuff happening with my family right now. It's a bit stressful, and I was playing downstairs on the TV. I just needed a game where I could kind of switch my brain off, and just like have podcasts on in the background and like have a bit of challenge that's almost frustrating. So I think it's one of those circumstances where in any other circumstance I would be a bit annoyed by this game and some of the stuff that it does, but I kind of just washed over me a little bit, and like I kind of like locked into the challenge and was like, yep, I'm dying like quite a bit here, but it's fine. I just want to, I want to keep doing this and getting through it. Because what it does is it locks off the world from like progression by gems, and you get these gems within a level, and you can get a total of 5 gems you can find in a level, and you can get 2 additional gems for collecting all the oranges. Oranges like coins, basically collectibles, and if you get like 220 out of 250, then you get 2 additional gems. And when you get to the end of the world to do the boss fight, you have to have a certain number of gems in order to open it up, right? Which, as we have talked about before, one of our least favorite mechanics in games. Like, just let people who want to just play through the game and not do all the collectible stuff get through the whole thing. But the thing with this game is it feels not Mario-esque, but in a way that, you know, in those Mario games, collecting the star coins is the real challenge. It does feel like a lot of the real kind of challenge of this game is going and getting those gems. So I enjoyed the platforming enough in order to go after those things. But just to bring it back to what Grapple Dog is as a concept, you play as this cute little dog. When he jumps, he kind of rolls into a ball, almost like Samus, and obviously you can jump onto enemies' heads to kill them, all that sort of stuff. But he has a grapple hook, and this grapple hook is something you can use with the Y button, and you just shoot it out either upwards, downwards, at an angled direction, and there are different things in the world you can hook onto. So you can hook onto these kind of blue floating discs in the sky that you can then swing back and forth on. Anything that's blue, basically, it's color-coded in a way. There are cannons that you can attach yourself to that are also blue that, you know, you can use the grapple to hook yourself into. And a lot of the later parts of this game tend to be long stretches with big spikes underneath, and you just swinging over long sections, trying not to fall and not to die. And it can get a little annoying where, like, you're right at the end of a section and then you fall on a spike pit and you're like, well, where was the last safe, like, bit of land I was standing on? The game's going to put me all the way back there. So it is a bit of a challenge when it comes to the latter half of the game, but I think, you know, it's enjoyable enough, and it's an enjoyable enough mechanic with, like, the momentum of the grapple hook and swinging yourself and trying to swing yourself up to a place where you can then wall jump into an area or, like, get above a platform, you know, that your grapple thing is underneath. There's a satisfaction to the kind of push and pull, the momentum of the swing that I really enjoyed. And so, like, I ended up putting like 10 hours into this thing in like 4 or 5 days. Basically every day after work I'd come downstairs and just be like, I'm just gonna put on a podcast and just play Grapple Dog for a bit, you know. And I locked into it pretty quickly, and at the end of the game I was like, okay, I've got like 170 gems, but I need 190 to do the final boss. And again, if I think it was a different mood or anything, I would be like, oh, whatever, I've seen most of this game, I can't be bothered. But I was like, sure, I'll go back and I'll go to some of the earlier levels and just pick up those gems that I sure now with my improved skills I can get a lot more easily, and like understanding the game and how they hide stuff a bit better. It'd be much easier for me to do. So I did, and then I beat the final boss and kind of ended it there. It opens up a final world, which is like, well, if you want to get every single gem, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. That seems like overkill. So yeah, but I really enjoyed it for what it was, and it has a good variety in terms of its settings and locations. Yeah, it's just very charming from a visual perspective. Just has this really nice look to it. Very cartoonish, but I don't know how to describe it really. Like, it has a kind of chunky pixel look in a way, but a bit smoother than you would usually expect. Like, I wouldn't say it's Celeste adjacent, but it's closer to that than like a regular pixel art platformer. It has its own identity and style, and I think that chunkiness, that kind of like big blocky feel, lends almost a kiddish persona, cartoonish persona. I will say there's a bunch of dialogue. I skipped all of it. I literally have no idea what the story is. I was like, I'm not here to sit through cutscenes of dogs talking to chickens and stuff about the world and a robot who's destroying it. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I'm literally gonna skip every dialogue. So I have no idea what the story is, frankly. But you know, I wasn't there to do that. I was there to grapple on things and swing on things and hook to places, and yeah, that's kind of what it was for me. So I would say I would recommend this with caution, just because I think ordinarily I would be annoyed by this game, but I do think that it has enough benefits to it to be worth checking out. I do think it is too long. I do think like 10 to 12 hours for a 2D platformer like this, it may be overstaying its welcome in that sense, and especially with the levels being so long. I think part of the reason I took so long with the levels is because I was dying trying to get gems, and then I would try and get it again, and I would die again, and I would just keep doing it. So if you just kind of mainline your way through, then you should be okay. I will say that Sports Story, with its kind of bugs and crashes and stuff, made me thought, like, you know, I don't know, is the Switch, you know, hard to develop for, or is it their fault, or whose fault is it that all this stuff is happening?
It might have become hard, hasn't it?
Yeah, but then playing Grapple Dog, the same thing happened, where like frame rate dips would happen that were really bad in the late game, and you know, and then it would freeze at some point, and then a couple of times it crashed on me in the final boss level when I was like part way through. Basically, I started this final boss level and I was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to do what I usually do and try and get the gems and stuff. And it took me like 10, 15 minutes, and then it crashed as I was teleporting to an area within that final level. I was like, well, I'm just not going to bother with those gems anymore, because it was the end of the game. I'm like, do I need these gems for anything? No, I'm just going to blitz through it. And so I blitzed through the final level, and that final level actually only took me like 10 minutes doing it fast, basically. So yeah, you can get through these levels if you go fast, but the problem is you kind of can't, because you need the gems in order to progress to each world. So the game encourages you to stay and explore and find each gem, right? So yeah, it's a bit of a balance there. I do wish that they would just get rid of that system altogether, but you know what? It's fine. I enjoyed it enough, and it did enough to kind of like distract my brain and turn it off, and you know, have multiple focuses, and sometimes that's what you want from a game. So you know, I thought Grapple Dog was a fine platformer and enjoyable, and you know, generally runs very well on Switch, aside from a few hiccups here and there where
Give
it can,
us a
it can
Switch
crash.
too.
Come on, man, let's do it.
Take my money.
Yeah, I'm waiting here. I'm waiting. My bank is open. Please, Nintendo, do something. All right, that is going to close us out for the first segment. Don't go anywhere, though, because after the break, we're going to be back looking ahead to 2023 and the video games, what shall accompany it. See you in a bit. All right, everyone, welcome back to the second part of today's show. It's time to look ahead. It's time to stare into the future of 2023 for what actually is announced. There's a bunch of games that have been announced for Switch. They're coming out in 2023. Some of them got release dates. Some of them don't got release dates and could very well be 2026 games. But, you know, they're on this list anyway, and they'll continue to be on this list for like 5 more years. We're going to see, and we're going to predict, and we're going to hope. We're not going to predict, actually. We're just going to talk through them, and we're going to say, we're going to play a little game, Bally. We introduced this game last year to the show. It's a little game I like to call, actually, I don't have a name for it. It's the Star Wars games future. I don't know. It's basically... So, okay, here's the explanation. When Bal and I were younger, we watched Star Wars a lot, right?
Yes.
And we would rewatch it a bunch of times, loads of times. And what we would do is we'd find scenes that we thought were funny to us, mainly in episode 2, and we would just rewind them again and again because we thought they were funny. So one of these scenes is where Obi-Wan comes to talk to Jango Fett, and Boba Fett answers the door, and Obi-Wan's like, "Boba, is your father at home?" And Boba goes, "Yup."
Yep.
And that we just found that very very funny.
It's the Kaminoan who asks Boba, and then
yeah, exactly, yeah. And he goes, "Yup."
Yep.
And that's so that's positive. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Now the negative is when Obi-Wan is chained up with Dooku, and Dooku's walking around, and Dooku's like, "Well, you know, Qui-Gon, I like it. He likes me. I was his master, remember?" And Obi-Wan's like, "Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you."
Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you.
So that's our Dooku basically. So we have our Boba. I noticed last year as well. I switched between Boba and Boba, and I actually don't know which one I say.
Well, they say Boba in the film, but the Kaminoans say Boba.
That's
true.
Like
they're posh English accent. So
exactly.
I think in the film itself they swap.
Look, we're going to switch between Boba and Boba.
Yeah.
Who knows? Okay, it's going to happen. But all I know is that basically what this means is both of us have 2 of these each, right? We both have 2 Bobas. We both have 2 Dookus. A Boba is a game that you're hyped for. You think is going to be good. You're excited. You think it's going to be great. You want it to be played by yourself, and you think it will be brilliant. A Dooku is a game where you're like, don't know, that might not come out. That might be bad. I'm skeptical of it for whatever reason. I don't like the smell of the game name. If you have synesthesia, I don't know. Like, there's lots of reasons you could say that you don't like a game. So that's your Dooku. So both of us have 2 of these each, and we're going to go down the list of these games, some with the release date, some with not, and we're going to pick those as we go along to add a little bit of spice and flavour to it.
You've got to say the phrase, "That's my Boba," or "That's my Dooku."
Exactly. And then I will inevitably inject sound effects in as well. So Anyway, Bally, shall we get ahead with this list of games?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's go through the games with release dates. I don't actually have the release dates written down, but these all have certified release dates for the start of the year. The first game, coming out very soon, I think next week, is A Space for the Unbound, which is a game that I've been following for quite a while. It is a kind of... It's a pixel art, side-scrolling, almost like narrative game. I don't think it might have RPG elements, but it feels more narrative-focused. I just really love the art of this thing. I think it has like such a cool visual style going on, and you know, we always kind of gravitate towards games with unique, interesting pixel art styles like Eastward, and you know, games that have that kind of thing going on with them. And this one has stuck out for me for a while. It's been on my wish list for a long time, and I'm just hoping that it comes out well. There was a game that came out last year called Goodbye World, which has a very Eastward feel to it, and reviews were not great for that game. It seemed like it was a bit too short and didn't really kind of get its message across, but yeah, this one seems pretty neat, and it is coming out relatively soon, so January 19th, Space for the Unbound. So I like this one quite a bit. I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, that's the first game. The next game up is Persona 4 Golden alongside Persona 3 Portable. They're finally happening, Bally. They're finally coming to Nintendo Switch. Do you think you're going to play these at some point?
I'd like to play them at some point. I just need to... They count as long games, and there's a long list of long games I need to play, but I'd like to put them on that list of long games, for sure. I
would say Persona is, as an RPG series, probably the thing that you would enjoy the most, maybe? I'm not sure, actually. Like, I think this is the thing, as we're talking about with Chained Echoes, is like, I think Persona still has archaic bullshit, which is slightly frustrating, but the nice thing about Persona is that it has difficulty levels to mitigate that, so playing these games on easy is basically like playing them with modern conveniences, because you don't have to worry about, you know, dying as much or like, you know, resources as much, because it's so easy that you can kind of skate through it. And the thing that's good about these games is the social stuff, the social calendar, you know, building relationships with people, all that sort of stuff, the narrative elements. It's really well voice acted and really well written, like all these games are. And obviously Persona 5 is already out on Switch, so it's a question of like, Persona 5 is way longer. Like, my Persona 4 Golden playthrough, I think, took me 55 hours, and Persona 5 took me 95. So there's a big gap in terms of length there. So 4 is definitely more achievable, let's say. Even though I would say overall from a gameplay perspective, 5 is the best one. I still personally like 4 the most. Just I have more personal connection with it. It's also like, it depends on what you like from a Japanese setting. Are you more into a urban Japanese setting, which is what 5 is? 5 is more like based around Tokyo and, you know, that area, versus kind of Inaba, which is the setting for Persona 4, is a rural Japanese setting. And I found I connected with the rural Japanese setting a lot more personally, but kind of depends how you feel about it. But
yeah, I'm happy to try either. I think because you prefer 4, right?
Yeah, I prefer it from a story standpoint. The thing is, I know that like old mechanics in RPGs rile you up, so it might be that 5 is actually a better spot for you. Like, they're both fantastic games, honestly. Like, you can't really go wrong choosing either. It just depends on your taste, really, and what you're looking for. So
need to give them a go.
Yeah. So I'm very happy they're finally coming to Switch, and we can then include them in our top 50 list. You know, every year there's more and more that finally my favorite games coming to Switch that can be counted. Coming out very soon, this week in fact, and we'll be talking about it on the next episode. Fire Emblem Engage, baby. The previews are looking hot for this thing. I don't know if you've seen much of people talking about this game, Bally.
I just saw that they have brought back the critical hit animations from the GBA games, and that is very cool.
The animation looks really good in this game. I think it's the best 3D animation has looked in the series so far, right? Because, you know, you're never going to compare to those GBA animations from just a pure, like, quality standpoint. They're just, like, so top tier. But, you know, if you're going to try and attempt to get there, these look way better than Three Houses or Fates or any of those games. I felt like the animations in those games always felt quite generic, whereas what Engage is putting forward looks a bit more, I don't know, like, each character has an identity to the animation, and you can kind of see it when they use the moves, which is nice. The thing that has got me excited about this game is people talking about it like it's a return to form for like the tactics and for like the focus on just GBA style Fire Emblem, where there's very light storytelling and like there is like it's like Three Houses where you go back to an area, but it's not like Three Houses where you got put off by it with all the calendar stuff and like having to go through all that stuff. It feels much more light touch in the way that you can like hang out there for a bit, maybe upgrade some weapons and talk to some people, but really you only spend like 5 minutes there and then you're on to the next battle. And I have enjoyed where Fire Emblem has gone in recent years of like the branching paths and fates and, you know, Three Houses having 3 different options. This is pretty much like you have an overworld map and you go from map to map and it's linear and you just do what the game tells you to do. And I know a lot of people will be turned off by that because they got into the series with Awakening and, you know, with Three Houses and like more modern Fire Emblem games that give you a bit more choice and are a bit more character focused and narrative focused. But, you know, and I really like that stuff as well. I kind of like all elements of Fire Emblem. But at heart, I'm a GBA boy when it comes down to it. And the idea that this is a back to basics Fire Emblem that has some really interesting mechanical changes, right? Like there's a system called the break system where basically if you use, you know, the weapon triangle, right? Like sometimes the way it worked in the past is that you get like a percentage hit bonus, essentially. That was the benefit of it. It's like if you use a sword on an axe, you're going to get a percentage hit bonus. Now, if you use a sword on an axe, they can't retaliate. So you know when you go into a fight in Fire Emblem, you attack, then they attack. If you use a weapon advantage on someone, they can't attack you back. And the enemies can do this to you as well. So it adds this like added tactical layer that I'm very interested to see how plays out and see how...
That's really good because I think Fire Emblem got to the point where you can just brute force your way through weaknesses and things. And for that to be the case, as you say, like you can't attack back if you got the... They can't attack you if they've got the advantage and vice versa. Mm-hmm. That's really strategic and I like that.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds good, right? Like, I know you don't have time to play big games, Bally, but if there was a Fire Emblem to get you back in, it feels like this might be the one, actually.
Yeah, so, I'm interested in reviews. If they're raving and I have time later in the year and I really want to get back into Fire Emblem, I might try it. But yeah, Three Houses really did put me off a bit. Yeah,
I mean, it feels like the opposite of Three Houses from what I've heard so far. So we'll see. Next up on the list, Bally, Onion Assault. What is Onion Assault? Tell us about it.
It's our favorite video game developer, Bertel Holberg, again, as famed for Gunman Clive and Mech Extermination Force, and
Super Punch Patrol as well. He did, which we weren't as hot on, but
a little less exciting. It's just so this game is like 2D platformer, and it's got a real Super Mario 2 pick up the turnips kind of vibe where you're picking up things. You can like pick up enemies and bosses and things in the trailer and stuff, and it looks a bit zany. It's got that Mech Extermination Force kind of art style. He does like this real, it's like a clear, crisp, but kind of chunky. It's very hard to describe. It's not pixel art, but it's quite a simple, thick, bold lines to like all his characters and things approach, and very colorful, and it looks cool. Like I think he was tweeting about it having some bug issues and things, so I'm hoping it can release clean. And again, I don't think his games get a ton of reviews, but I'm hoping that, you know, it's early in the year, the calendar is clear, other than perhaps something like Fire Emblem Engage coming out, and hopefully a few reviewers will pick this up, and we certainly will pick it up and give it a go. And it's nice that he's returning back to 2D platforming, where we were both a little less hot on Super Punch Patrol.
Yeah, and that's mainly because genre, right? We don't like side-scrolling beat-em-ups. As you know, it was well made, but just wasn't really my thing. But the whole Super Mario Brothers 2 influence, where you can pick up enemies and throw them, very cool. Not many games kind of use Mario 2 as an influence, so I like to see that. It's always good to have that going on. The next game is Blanc, which this was shown in a Nintendo Direct, which is a kind of a cute game with a deer and a fox, I believe, or maybe, I think it's something along those lines, where they kind of like, it's almost like it feels like a co-op adventure, but I don't actually know if it is co-op or not. It just has like, it has chill, sad, melancholy, and it's one of those games where you look at it and you're like, well, one of these is going to die at the end of the game, aren't they? That's just the way it's going to be. But it looks pretty cute. What are you feeling about this one, Bally?
It looks very cute. I don't think I could have my heart broken like that if one of them does die.
Yeah,
but
I know.
If it comes out and it's co-op, and I don't know if we'd be able to play it online co-op, but
I don't think games like this tend to have online co-op.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing.
Almost feels like a Brothers situation, maybe, where it's like a single player kind of co-op thing.
Yeah, I'd be interested for sure. Loads of this type of game coming to Switch, and a lot of them kind of like fade into the background, and that's a shame because I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Next up, we have Theatre Rhythm Final Bar Line. So Theatre Rhythm is a series, mainly from 3DS, which is essentially Square Enix being like, hey, we have a lot of good music. How about we leverage that good music in a game where we put all of it in and you can play rhythm games to it? And that's exactly what they did on 3DS. And I actually bought the final, I think, curtain or whatever, the second Theatre Rhythm, which has more music on 3DS before the 3DS eShop went away. And then they announced this. I'm like, well, I guess I could have just waited for this. But in any case, it feels like it's putting all of the music from before into this one game. Has music from every Final Fantasy, I believe, alongside some other games like Live Alive is going to be in this one. There's going to have some music from Nier. There's going to have Octopath music in here, Chrono Trigger, the Mana series. Like, it's basically a who's who of Square Enix soundtracks. And I think it's a great idea. I've not yet picked up Theatre Rhythm to play on my 3DS. I've bought it, obviously, but I do want to check that out at some point this year. So I might be talking about that on a show sometime soon. And in lieu of getting this, because this is going to be super expensive when it comes out, and I'd like to check it out, but it kind of depends how much music crosses over. And like, if I already have access to a bunch of that music on the 3DS game, maybe it does make sense to get this. But yeah, I don't know. It's a type of rhythm game that looks Guitar Hero-esque in a sense, but also has like different kind of ways you can engage with it. It looks a little complicated, but I'm sure it makes sense once you kind of understand what's going on. But yes, I would like to play.
The art style is jarring with me quite violently, but
just all the chibi characters.
Yeah,
right?
it just looks, I don't know. But as you say, this isn't about the looks, it's about all that amazing music that they've pumped in there, and especially a game like Octopath Traveler, like that is maybe my favorite JRPG soundtrack. So yeah, that sounds cool. All
right, next up, Tales of Symphonia Remastered. That's my Dooku, Bally. That's my Dooku.
Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you.
Here's the thing. Tales of Symphonia, a beloved game by many people, came out on the GameCube many years ago. What did they do? They ported it over to other systems. They put it on PC at one point. What happened with that PC version? Well, the GameCube version ran at 60 frames per second. The PC version in what, like 2018 or something when they put it out, had a 30 FPS cap. Which is baffling, right? Like, a GameCube ran this game at 60 frames, and now every version seems to come out and is 30 frames, and I just don't understand it. Like, what are you doing, Square Enix? What is wrong with you? This is called Tales of Symphonia Remastered. This should be the best version of the game, and yet, even on Switch, and they're using the PC version for the Switch version, it's going to be a 30 FPS lock, and I can't abide by it. I think another reason this is my Dooku is I've tried with the Tales series. I put 30 hours into Tales of Vesperia, and man, it was a trying experience. Like, just the character writing and stuff it's the kind of anime bullshit that I thought was just very bad. And I think it might just be a thing of the era. Like, just the writing wasn't very good back then, and the voice acting wasn't very consistent, and it just felt overly long and bloated, and the combat was frustrating. And, you know, I've heard good things about Symphonia, but I think having played Vesperia, which is a game that happened afterwards, it was a 360 game, so it was like a generation later, so it should be better from like a gameplay perspective. I don't know that I want to go back and experience Symphonia, and it might just be that I have to play the newer game, right? So Tales of Arise came out a couple of years back, and I'm kind of interested in that because it feels more modern in terms of its combat.
Did really well, right?
It did super well, yeah, like the best-selling Tales game in the series, I think, and it had a bigger budget, and it looks more modern and interesting, and yeah, I know there are huge fans of Tales of Symphonia out there, so everyone is shouting at their podcast app right now that I'm giving this my Dooku, but yeah, I don't think it's gonna pan out as a great port on Switch. And so often we find that, you know, ports come to Switch and some are great, some are amazing, but I think this is going to be one where people are going to be frustrated once again that it just doesn't live up to what people want from a remaster of that game. So we'll see how it goes. Next up, Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, a remake of the Wii game, a Wii game that came out very late in the Wii's life cycle. I don't know if you remember much about this game, Bally, but it's basically another side-scrolling Kirby, except for he has big weapons, I believe is the gimmick in this one. So, like, He powers up and he has, like, a giant sword or something like that, and it's like a screen-clearing attack that happens, essentially. I don't know. I think if I'm going to go back to a Kirby game, I'm looking at those 3DS games more than I am at Dreamland, Return to Dreamland.
I'd agree. I'd be surprised if this makes waves. Those Kirby games must do something because he churns out games like candy floss at this point. Like there's
really does.
2 a year. I mean, there was 2 last year. Feels
Yep.
like we're going to get at least 1 or 2 this year, and I'm sure there'll be another one next year. Like someone's buying all these Kirby games, so yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed Forgotten Land last year. I love it. I like 3D. We obviously love Canvas Curse. I agree with you. I'd be more interested in the 3DS games, but I just do not care for this game. There's too much going on for me to want to try this.
Alrighty. Well, next up we have Octopath Traveler 2.
That's my boba.
Yep.
There you go, and there it is. Bally, take us away.
Oh.
What's exciting you about Octopath Traveler 2?
As boring as this sounds, it's more Octopath Traveler, and I know that we were very different in our views on a lot of the structural things in that game, but we can agree that the fight system, the music, like there's some really strong stuff about that first game, and I'm like, this sequel feels very fresh in the sense of like, it's 8 new characters, 8 new worlds. It's a lot more steampunky and industrial, which I'm very looking forward to, whereas the previous one was very much more traditional fantasy. So I'm very excited by that. I want more banging tunes. I want some more intricate, well-told little stories that I think the first game did do well. I'd love it, if possible, if they can do the overarching story that does link the 8 stories without doing the crazy end game level 70 rubbish that the first game had. Part of me is concerned that they will just stick to that blueprint and not change much, but if they can sort out some of the party shuffling to make sure that there's a little less grinding, and nail some of those intricate smaller stories, I'd be very interested. I also think some of the worlds, the areas in the first game were a bit too tropey, and I'm hoping that this game, each world can be a bit more distinct. And from the trailers we've seen so far, it does seem to be doing that. So I'm pretty hopeful for this one. I hope that more people than just Octopath Traveler 1 fans play this game, because I think it's a really cool series.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very hopeful for Octopath Traveler 2. Maybe I shouldn't be, but I am hopeful that they are going to right some of the wrongs and make it so that story is a little bit more tied together and that it works. And I think the problem is if they stick to the Octopath quote-unquote structure of like going around the world to collect everybody and then doing all individual chapters for everybody, that's the issue there, because it doesn't lend itself to putting it all together.
I'd be surprised if they break out of that, because I agree that is one of the flaws, is that you do 8 intro chapters and 8 final bosses, and in my opinion, JRPGs should have 1 final boss and 1 intro chapter. And when intros and outros take up half the game, it can get a little bit tiresome. So I agree. I hope they can iron that out. If they do stick to that format, I'll probably still love the game, but I do hope they can improve on that.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to look gorgeous. It's going to sound great. Those things that we know, and it's probably going to play fantastically as well, right? Like the combat is awesome. I want better exploration. I want richer towns, because frankly the towns suck in that game. They're all the same with boring NPCs built just to take advantage of their stupid system, where each character has like a quirk that like, oh, I can steal or I can bargain or whatever, right? So they feel so dead and empty, and that kind of is reflected in the world. And again, the story stuff is the main issue that I have, is like it just doesn't come together in a satisfying way. So take a leaf out of Live Alive's book, Octopath Traveler, in some senses, right? Absolutely. Next up is Ib, which is a game that was announced for Switch last year in a Nintendo Direct. And someone at work, this is one of their favorite games, and they're telling me about, like, it's a cult classic, and a lot of people kind of played it in the early internet days. And you look at it and you're like, well, this definitely looks like an old video game in a lot of senses, but it has that kind of psychological horror mixed with RPG styling that I think Undertale and other games of like Omori have that kind of vibe, right? It feels like one of those, and is a cult classic for a reason. So I'm interested in at least checking it out and seeing what people say about it when it comes to Switch at some point this year. I think that does have a release date. I think it's like March or something, but that seems pretty cool. Also in March, Bayonetta Origins, Cereza and the Lost Demon, the most 3DS-ass Switch game coming out this year.
I do not know what to make of this game, honestly.
I have no idea, honestly. Yeah, it looks cute. and it looks like it's like telling almost a storybook kind of narrative, like a fairy tale almost. Like when they presented it, they used like a book to like flip through pages and stuff like that, and it has that kind of like childlike feeling, which Bayonetta is very much the opposite of childlike when it comes to its humor and its characters and everything that they do. So the question here is like, are they just trying to appeal to a younger audience with this game, or is it like, you know, just like an introduction to the Bayonetta series for people? I'm not sure, but I'm curious to see what it is really, because it feels almost like a Zelda style thing, right? Like it's isometric, there seems to be combat, but you're also exploring these spaces. I could get into it. I'm not like, as you know, Valley, I'm not here for the story of Bayonetta, so I really care about the lore of the backstory.
Does part of you think this game could do very badly?
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling from it. I'm feeling like, oh, woof. You know, I
Well,
don't know.
I think-
It's just a bit. I don't know. It's really hard to describe. It's just very. I think it's also not great that it's so juxtaposed to what you think of as Bayonetta, like that. The 3D action. And it's so top down and slow paced. And as you say, like, I wasn't into Bayonetta's story either. And if it's going to be a hell of a lot more story focused, like, is there a big enough audience for that?
I don't know. We'll maybe. I think there's a lot of also big Bayonetta fans who had a sour taste in their mouth at the ending of Bayonetta 3, right? So it's weird because I think in some ways it's good, because what it is doing is it's trying to expand the IP, right? It's trying to reach a different audience. Like one of the benefits you could say is people who like you don't want to play 3D character action games, do like Zelda style games. Maybe it is something that opens it up to a new audience, and it's taking the IP and it is saying, well, you know, you might not like this style of gameplay, but maybe you'll jive with this instead. And you know, I think we talk about that a lot with Nintendo. Of like, I wish Nintendo would do Splatoon spin-offs in different genres. So in some senses, I'm kind of glad that they are kind of branching it out a bit more and giving more opportunities. So next up, we have a Nice Death, which is already out on PC in early access. It's a roguelike that got showed off a little while ago. And you play as the Grim Reaper. Very, very good animation in this game.
Really cool.
Has like almost a stylized like Cartoon Network show look to it.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like Hollow Knight with an extra dose of Cartoon Network thrown in. Like it's that extra real exaggerated sizes of certain things to make it punch more, you know.
Yeah, totally. And it's got very positive reviews on Steam right now, so I'm sure when it hits 1.0 and comes out on Switch, it's going to be a roguelike that quite a few people will be talking about. You know, maybe we'll have the same effect as stuff like Rogue Legacy or stuff like Hades, where it comes to console and that's where people actually give it the time of day and talk about it. So yeah, excited to see how that does. Next up, we have Storyteller. That's my boba.
Yep.
Storyteller, I'm very, very interested in this game. So this game is basically a narrative puzzle game where you have these scenarios and you put characters into these scenarios and you basically create stories almost comedically, in a sense, where you can swap people out. You basically have a situation where it's like, okay, in the first panel you can have two characters and they're going to be in love, so you're like, you can choose from a selection of different characters you have and put them on the page, and you basically have to create a narrative that works. And I'm not sure how they do this from a gameplay standpoint, right? Like, how do you make a win point, right? How do you get to a win state so that you can move on to the next one? Or maybe it is just like, I don't know, just put things in place and move them around and see if it works. I'm very curious to see how it turns out. If nothing else, I think it's a very unique concept that I want to see, how they pull it off and how they achieve it, because there's some fun stuff going on there, and I think this will be a fun one for streamers to kind of mess around with and see what different scenarios they can come up with. I love the animation style. I think it looks very unique and different. I hope it turns out well. So I believe that's being published by Annapurna as well.
Really cool little idea. Yeah, I was... We're going to talk about Fancy Critic and bonus bits, I guess, but I was very close to counterpicking someone who had this. And then I saw that Annapurna published it. I'm like, no, I'm not going to counterpick. Because I was like, yeah, they see something here that I'm not seeing, so I'm not going to counterpick that. But yeah, it looks very cool.
Yeah, very interested in how that one does. We have the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection coming out, which, just in keeping with Capcom putting out collections for all of their games, that is going to be all the GBA Battle Network games that I know a lot of people grew up playing. I know a lot of people in the Pokemon community also played the Battle Network games. I know Elo back in the day played a lot of those games. So I think there's a bit of a crossover there, which is pretty cool. I never played one of these. I'm not sure what they're like, but there are a couple of indie games that have been influenced by Battle Network, most specifically One Step from Eden, which is a roguelike kind of version of Battle Network in the sense that it has the same combat setup with like the 4 grid slots on each side and moving around and the kind of the card based stuff going on. I don't fully know how all that combat stuff works, but it seems neat, and I'm sure the fans of that will be very, very excited. Then we got a game that no one cares about. It's called The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom.
I've not bobered it because it would be too boring, but
yes, same here.
It's what an exciting time, you know. Even if it gets pushed from May 12th, which would be a shame, it still feels like it's going to come out this year, and that is, I think you said this is the longest between 3D Zeldas we've ever had, and it's a sequel. So that's very exciting, and I am concerned about the power of the Switch. I know I said my prediction that I think it will run fine, but I don't really feel it, and I am nervous. And I also hope, coming off of a year that's had Elden Ring, that it can still wow the crowds. It's a lot of pressure, and I'm really just hoping it can live up to that pressure. And if there's one team who can live up to pressure, it is the Zelda team. And they did that with Breath of the Wild. I think that game had incredibly high expectations from everything we'd seen about that game and the long run up that it had, and it still delivered. I really hope Tears of the Kingdom can do it.
Yeah, it's really hard to say at the moment. We just haven't seen enough of the game.
No, and I think they're going to keep it that way till launch, aren't they? It feels like. I don't know if we're going to see necessarily that much more.
Nintendo do like to do big pushes on these big games, so it feels like the marketing ramp up is going to happen in the next couple of months, right? Like, there will inevitably be some kind of Nintendo Direct, either February or March, probably February, and they're gonna have, that's 3 months away from release, so they're gonna have to pull the curtain back a bit more than they have so far, right? Like, I think that we're gonna get a full-blown trailer this year, definitely. Well, we have to.
Will they do preview events for press?
I wonder if they do that. Yeah, alongside like a February Direct, they might have a preview thing, if possible. And I think, yeah, that's definitely viable. You know what we should do? We should both just boot up Breath of the Wild on Switch and go back to it and be like, how do we feel about it? How does it hold up visually, right? And all that stuff. Because I think that might give us more confidence that this game will be fine, right? Because I do, I feel like it's still one of the best looking games on the system and still like runs very smoothly.
I booted up Breath of the Wild quite a while ago, but after like owning a PS5 Series X, and it's one of those things where frame rate is very jarring initially, but as you play on it does fade away, like most visual things. Your eye gets very used to it very quickly, and I think that's what I'm saying, like if it runs at a smooth 30, I think it's all fine. It's not ideal, but it works. It's fine. It's if there are areas that do make it chug, and I think that's the concern, especially now that like we're talking a lot more about verticality in terms of like the sky, and is there going to be flying style of traversal? I know we saw that like weird stone bird thing that he was kind of gliding or flying on briefly, so I am concerned, but hopefully they can stick the landing.
Yeah, for sure. We should give Tears of the Kingdom the Qui-Gon Jinn Award for most excited, anticipated game.
Oh,
maybe.
yes.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's a very special time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, looking forward to it. The next game is The Legend of Heroes Trails into Reverie, which is part of the ongoing Trails series that has like 20 entries in. I have the first Trails game on my Steam Deck, Bally, and I'm just, every time I look at it, I'm like, I need to start that. I need to get into this series, because the people who talk about this series, they're like Xenoblade fans, man. They're fucking crazy, right? They're like, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, the best series ever made. And it's one of those series where you kind of have to play all of them because they're all connected, and there's like 20 of them, and there's so much stuff going on. And this game originally came out in Japan, I think, a couple of years ago, so it's now being finally localized for the West. But I just wanted to give a shout out because I know there are Trails fans out there who would be chagrined if we skipped over it. But my intention is to play a Trails game this year, and that is a goal that I hope to attain. And now with Steam Deck, it makes it much easier. So
Is this going to be the one?
What, this game in particular?
Yeah.
I think
Or you
they're
want to
all...
start at the start maybe or something? I don't know.
No, this is like probably like the 7th game in one of the sub-series. I have no idea, frankly. So it's probably not a good starting point for anybody. But I do hope that Trails gets its breakthrough game at some point in the West, that people are like, oh, this is the one you should start with. Because at the moment, you kind of have to start with one that is quite old and hard to get into. But I am looking forward to diving into that at some point. Then we have a controversial game, Hogwarts Legacy.
That's my Dooku.
Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you.
There we go. I thought that might be. Yeah, how are you feeling about this this thing?
Me personally, I'm not that into Harry Potter. I have seen the films. I have read the books. I think they're all good. However, certainly I've not been that into Harry Potter in quite a long time. And then obviously since all this Rowling stuff, I've had very little interest in Harry Potter. I Dooku'd this because I'm fascinated to see how the video game commentariat handle this. My hope, and I think Greg Miller mentioned this just the other day, where he said, like, my job is to be a reviewer. I'm going to review this game, and I respect that. And like, I think that it's important that I do want people to review this game, but I hope that your outlets, even your sites as big as IGN, are able to give the context, and the context shouldn't affect the review. It probably will in some cases. I hope it doesn't. I hope that this game can be rewarded on its merits, but for outlets to be able to give the context as to the situation that the whole Harry Potter franchise finds itself in. And I'm not sure I'm going to come away from the whole release feeling that warm about how the industry reacted, to be honest. And it's a bit of a sad state of affairs, but hopefully at least some outlets can give the context as to why it should be made known what Rowling's views are on trans rights, and it's a big deal.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, to add on to that, like, it's coming to Switch, and I feel like it's going to not be a good version at all.
No, hell no.
They are pushing this as like a big like game where you explore the whole school and the grounds and everything, and it's like, well, they're not going to do a cloud version for Switch. They're doing a native version for Switch, which is, man, in 2023, that's pushing the envelope quite a bit, especially for a game that is targeting PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, right?
Is there another game that is launched on PS5, Xbox Series X, that has also come to Switch that is kind of third-person, semi-open world game?
I don't know, yeah.
This might be the first.
It tends to be the case that if they do that, it's like Control, where they're like, it's cloud, that's all we can do. So, yeah, even the JK stuff aside, like, I think it might be a terrible port as well. Like, it just might be, like, Hogwarts Legacy on Switch might be one of the worst things released in 2023 for many reasons. So, yeah.
And I do feel sorry for Harry Potter fans. I think they've been put in a position they didn't want to be in. And, we've talked about, what if George Lucas did something this bad? How would we feel and how would we respond? And, it is difficult. And
well, he doesn't financially benefit from it anymore, right? Which is one of the bonuses versus JK, who does.
What if he did? What if he did, though?
If he did, then it's a fucking hard situation.
It'd be very conflicting. And all these things are size and scale and scope. Like, Saudi Arabia just increased their share in Nintendo by 1%, so they're up to like 6%. Yeah,
right.
That sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Like their record on human rights is awful. Like, so everything needs to be reviewed and awarded on its merit. However, I think that outlets need to do better to give context to these things, because if every single review of every Nintendo game for the next 10 years had a banner across the top saying Nintendo is partially owned by the Saudi Arabian government, they have done X, Y, and Z, then maybe Nintendo there'd be more done to stop these things happening. So it's the onus on outlets and to make it clear the context in which these games are coming out, and that we do need to have more banners, I would argue, on reviews when it comes to controversial topics. And this is a big one.
Scrutiny needs to be applied, and it needs to be shown to an audience, and that's important. All right, well, that is everything with a release date coming out this year. We then have a big list of things that don't have any release dates, and we don't know if they will come out this year, but they might. A lot of indie stuff in here, of course. A lot of stuff that's been shown off in Nintendo Directs at various points in time. We have Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, which is a Jet Set Radio inspired game that looks very cool, has a very stylish kind of edge to it. I like skating games a lot, right? Like, we played a bunch of The Ramp, which is like almost like a toy more than a game. And that game is very much like it doesn't have any goals or anything, but I just enjoy turning it on and just playing about with it because the feel of skating is fantastic. And it feels like this game is taking what Jet Set did, which is like skating and like movement and kind of building on it. But just like, if the skating feels good, I'm kind of in for something like this, That's the thing that kind of like I could just do without, as I said in my kind of Game of the Year thing for Ollie Ollie World, I don't need any goals. As long as it feels nice to move around, that's what I'm here for. So it looks very good, and I not played the original Jet Set Radio, but I think that fan base is quite excited to see how this does.
Really cool looking game.
Great
again,
style.
concerned how it will run on Switch, but it does look very cool.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Botany Manor was shown in a direct recently. This is a game from, I believe, someone who worked at Us2, who are the makers of Monument Valley and those types of games. And they've gone out on their own to make a kind of like nice first-person kind of garden simulator, as it were. You live in this manor, you go around, you kind of plant plants and kind of just do that sort of stuff. And, I like games like this. We've talked about a lot of how mundanity is being brought into games a lot more these days, and just stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think is a setting for a game or a thing you would do in a game. And there's lots of games out there like, potion crafting games and stuff like that kind of draw on this playbook and, almost Harvest Moon adjacent in some senses. But this looks very charming and very nice, and almost reminds me of The Witness from a visual standpoint, right? Kind of like bright colors and outdoor environments. Yeah, how do you feel about this kind of genre, this type of game, Bally? Because I don't feel like we play that many of them, but sometimes like one comes along that's kind of a chill kind of puzzle adventure in a sense, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what was the one that I played on PS5? I've forgotten the name of it now. Can you remember?
I have
one
no
I'm
idea.
talking about?
Are you talking about like a narrative first-person game?
No, it was the puzzle.
Maquette.
Maquette,
right?
yeah.
Yes.
Ultimately, these games are more about just their ideas, and it comes down, in my opinion, with Maquette to like how well it's delivered. The idea is fantastic; it works well, but the way that was enabled through a video game, the mechanics didn't feel strong enough. So, in my opinion, like, yes, these games look pretty. I like being in pretty worlds. But in order for the game to sing with me, it needs to like be mechanically strong, and you're not scared you're going to fall through the world, which happened a few times in Maquette. But yeah,
totally. Next up, we have Cocoon, which is another game from people who made Inside. It feels like every other day we're like, oh well, this is from the people who made Inside. It's like, how many people made Inside and making other games, right? Because obviously Somerville came out last year, and that seemed like a disappointment for people.
Yeah.
And now we have this game, Cocoon, which is it's kind of a puzzle platformer, it looks like, and it has a nice style to it. I don't know though. I feel like I'm a bit more after Somerville came out and wasn't great. I'm maybe a bit more skeptical. How do you feel about Cocoon?
I don't know how to feel about Cocoon, honestly. It looks really cool. Looks like a bunch of 2D Zelda puzzles all put together, and if it does that well, that's a really promising thing. Part of the strength of Zelda maybe is arguably that it mixes up a bit of action with puzzles. So if it's purely puzzles, this game, maybe that could get a little tiresome. But at the same time, if those puzzles are really well designed, which the trailer implies that they are, then it could be really cool.
Exactly, and we'll see. I think that has a good chance of coming out this year, so we'll see how it does. Next up is Desta, The Memories Between, which again shown in one of the presentations, and this is a game that is already out, I believe, on Netflix. Netflix's whole thing, you never know like what games they have or how many or how to access them, but they've got a lot of stuff on there at the moment. And this is from Us2 Games, who made Alba, which I talked about earlier this year, as well as Monument Valley and Assemble with Care. Like, they make very good games. This one seems neat. I don't really understand it. It's kind of like sports meets tactics puzzle game. Like, it's got a weird kind of isometric look to it. But
looks neat. For me, the art style is speaking to me a lot more than the mechanics, perhaps.
Yes,
but we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. Then there's the French game that no one can pronounce every time I hear people on podcasts talk about it. I believe it's Dordogne, right? It would be Dordogne would probably be the way you would say it. But it might...
I would just go Dordon.
Yeah, it might be
Don.
just Dordon, but I
would pronounce the N, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it would have to have an accent on the E for it to have an extra inflection.
Yeah.
But Dordon is probably the way you would do it. The one thing my French teacher said I had a good French accent, and nothing else was good about my French. But in any case, yeah, this is a very nice kind of stylized adventure, very painterly, watercolory, but also
I think when people say painterly in video games, it's a lot more thick and acrylic-y. This is actually painterly, I would argue.
Yes.
Like it's proper like watercolors, very undefined edges, and looks incredible.
It's literally a 3D character just walking on a watercolor painting. That's literally what it is, which I think is very, very stunning and cool. It has vibes of what Alba was as well, that I played this year. Then we have a game that should have come out a long time ago. The Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster series. Bally, that's my Dooku.
Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you.
Once more, again, a remaster coming to Nintendo Switch that I think is going to underwhelm people. Now, here's the thing. You know, they have perfectly good versions of these games, GBA versions of these games, that they could have used for a lot of stuff, right? And they decided we're going to do this Pixel Remaster series, which is somewhat between GBA and Super Nintendo, with like a decent visual upgrade, but not perfect, and it doesn't kind of fit exactly. But the main bugbear that I know is not going to get fixed, and people have complained about, is the text. The text in this game is so bad. It is like mobile-esque. It is like really, really awful to look at, and just takes away from the feel of these being Final Fantasy games. They feel cheaper, and they feel less important because of the treatment that they've given to the text in this game. And I know that's maybe an overboard statement to say, but I think it is true. I think that had they gone with a look that it was more reminiscent of the GBA in terms of the style of how the text comes across, like a more pixelated look, I would have been far more in on this entire thing. Not to mention that the whole thing together is like 75 quid, which is just exorbitant pricing. And each of them are like so overpriced for what they are. It's just, I really feel like they could have done so much better. Not only is it coming late, like at least 6 or 12 months later than it came to PC and to mobile, but they feel like they're an underwhelming way to put these games out there for people. And I want better from Square Enix across the board, and they just don't seem to want to be better. So, unfortunately, that's how it is.
Doesn't look good.
On the upside, you know, you can now play official English versions that look like the originals for Final Fantasy III and for Final Fantasy V, because Final Fantasy III was only remade in 3D on DS, so you never got a traditional Final Fantasy III remake, and Final Fantasy V has up to this point only been on the GBA. So, you know, in any case, you can play some of the games that you weren't able to before in a better manner, but I will likely just stick to playing the GBA versions myself, because those are the ones I prefer.
Yeah,
but at least you can buy these individually, right? If I wanted to, because 3 is the one really that I would want to get, because there isn't a GBA version for 3, so 3 might be the one I pick up here, but I don't know, I wish that they would change things. And the problem with Switch is there's no modability, so on PC people have modded out the bad text and they've modded in good text, and you can't do that on Switch, sadly, so it's up to Square Enix. Next up, we have Gunbrella, a very cool looking game that they had a demo for over Steam Next Fest that I played, and it felt pretty good. Nice. I think Gunbrella is pretty neat. Has a nice momentum to it, like the whole idea of the umbrella that kind of like gives you aerial movement alongside the gun that you can use to... You can also use the umbrella to block attacks as well coming towards you.
Is it more level-based or Metroidvania-y?
It's more Metroidvania-y, yeah. Okay. It's you have benches, so you kind of have benches like Hollow Knight where you can save. The one thing in the demo that put me off was, I think maybe it was my fault for missing a bench, but I think I died right at the edge of where I could have got a save after a town. Like I was in a town, I was like, in this town there should be a bench, but there wasn't one. It was only after the town, and then I died and I had to go really far back, and I was like, that kind of sucks. So I hope they kind of iron out the checkpointing stuff a bit better. But yeah, it feels like it's going to be a good fun time from a mechanic standpoint.
Looks really cool. I agree. The idea of like a gun that's also an umbrella and you're gliding, but also not just gliding, grinding like on rails, and then obviously shooting as it's a gun. Really cool little idea.
the vertical momentum you get from using the umbrella is actually quite a lot. Like when you jump and you kind of puff it up, you go pretty high in the air. So it actually is really good for getting around and moving around the space. So yeah, feels great. Now, maybe we're tempting fate here, Bally, but next on the list is a game that may never come out. It's called Hollow Knight Silk Song. What are your odds of this actually releasing in 2023?
I'd go 80%. I think it's good odds, and that's mainly because Microsoft included it in their this is what you can look forward to for the remainder of this year, and was it the first half of 2023, I want to say? So I think that the fact that it was included there, and they were very much proud to announce it was day one Game Pass, makes me feel like it's coming this year. And even if it gets delayed out of that window, I think it will come near the end of the year. I think we are due. It's coming. I think it's happening.
I can't believe that they showed this game playable at a treehouse like 4 years ago. Like, what the hell, man?
Was it DLC then, and then it became its own game? Or?
I think it was in the transition point between DLC and full game. So
Okay.
they had announced it as a full game already by that point, but it was only like maybe 4 or 5 months after they had announced it was changing from DLC to a full game. So maybe the portion that they showed was like DLC stuff that they're like, it's fine, Nintendo can show that off. And yeah, it turns out game development takes time, especially for... I honestly, I cannot imagine the pressure these guys are under. Like, following up what is now considered like a cult classic, one of the greatest games of all time by so many people, it must be like so difficult to do that, right? Like, I can't... It's, the stress must be crazy, and they clearly want to get it right. They clearly want to take their time with it, so fair play.
I think it'll be hard to match the impact of Hollow Knight, especially on the industry.
Yeah.
And we love Hollow Knight, but the industry seems to like think that Hollow Knight's the next coming of Christ. Like like Elden Ring levels of innovation and originality, and I think it's great. I don't think it's that high up, but I'm very intrigued by how the industry will react to Silk Song, because I think it'll be like Ragnarok. I think it'll be just as good, if not better, than the first game, but a little less impactful, and that's still a very good result for that game.
Absolutely. We then have Metal Slug Tactics, which is a tactics game based in the Metal Slug universe. Looks very cool. I like the look of this thing, and I'm always down for tactics stuff. And the pixel art is great, so I hope that turns out well. I'm not sure what team is working on this, but hopefully they have some good pedigree. Looks pretty nice. Mina the Hollower, Bally, the follow-up Yacht Club Games' next IP after Shovel Knight, is coming supposedly this year. It feels like this is one of those games where it probably looks like it should be able to come out sooner than we think, just based on the art style and the visuals and stuff, because it's a Game Boy game, right? Like, it looks like a traditional Game Boy game, but it is doing modernization just like Shovel Knight did to the kind of side-scrolling 2D DuckTales platformer. Mina the Hollower is basically saying, like, hey, what if we matched up Link's Awakening with Castlevania? And it's a really cool combo. And the question is, does it come out this year? I'm not sure, just because they did a Kickstarter, I think, end of maybe 2021. So it feels like it's coming around for its time at this point.
Yeah. Will it have the crazy long trading quests that have put me off Sports Story that are in Link's Awakening?
Yeah, I wonder. They'll probably have a nod to it in some sense.
Yeah,
but they probably
I'll take a nod. But if it takes up a big chunk of the game, I'll be a bit grumpy.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see how this thing does. I'm curious if it will break through in the same way as Shovel Knight. I wonder if it has the juice to do that. We'll see.
Quick question. What is a hollower?
I don't know. I think it's just like because she can burrow underground, maybe.
She makes things hollow.
He makes things hollow? Yeah, right, I guess that's
hollower.
the thing. I think they've just made it up as a title. I have no idea. Next up is Minako's Night Market, one of those games that's been hanging around for a long time and has been in Nintendo Directs here and there, and it's one of those indie games that I look at and I'm like, is that coming out? I don't know if it's even coming out, but it seems like it might do this year. Has an art style, I would say, that's reminiscent of, it's somewhat Kato, but also a little bit of like the Wild at Heart. Like has that look to it, which I think is pretty neat.
Quite a few games mimicking that similar style in recent years, actually, in games. It's just become a little bit more popular. It seems a bit like Stardew-ish.
Yeah, it's kind of like adventure-y, narrative-y, like has lots of little elements. I don't actually know what kind of genre it really fits into, but I know a lot of people are excited about it just from a visual.
And it's got cats and it's cute. That's the main thing. It's a cute game.
Exactly. That's how it gets high review scores, is cats and cute things. So we'll see how it does. Oxenfree 2 is happening. I think we both enjoyed the first Oxenfree.
Yeah.
I'm not like overly like a massive fan of Oxenfree 1, but I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. And this one is now being published by Netflix because Netflix owns the developer. But yes, I believe it is still coming to Switch. So yeah, it's not one that I would jump in day one on, but it's one that I'm like, let's wait for reviews, see what people say, and maybe I'll pick it up if I'm interested later down the line. But yeah, I wouldn't say that the first Oxenfree was a top tier indie for me, so I'm not like super on board day one. But how are you feeling about it, Bally?
Yeah, Oxenfree was like one of the first games I played that was narrative driven that had voice acting, as mad as that sounds.
Yeah.
So I found it very impactful at the time. I didn't love where the story ended, but I loved the way that it told its story, and maybe that's less impactful in 2023 if it goes for something similar, because I think Oxenfree 1 was a really long time, like 2016, 17?
Yeah, it was quite a while ago.
And
yeah.
So that type of game was more impactful then than now, so I'm intrigued. I know After Party, their other game in between, didn't do amazing.
No,
but,
it didn't.
I hope they can do something nice with Oxenfree for sure.
Yeah. Has a unique dialogue system that I think was the kind of the standout thing from
Right.
the game. Also quite creepy for a 2D game. Still
Yes.
got a bit of scares out of me. So, Pepper Grinder, a new indie from Devolver, which basically was like, hey, you know that section in Ori where you burrow underground? How about we make a whole game about that and we mix it with Drill Dozer, with a character that kind of looks like the main character of Drill Dozer. This thing looks like Mechanical Juice, the
Yeah.
game. Like, it feels like I like it a lot.
So this and Gumbrella both Devolver, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're really going for the 2D platformer kind of unique traversal thing.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
do we know if this one's more level based or Metroidvania?
I think it is a bit more level based. Yeah, It
Okay.
seems like the way it's designed anyway, it looks very much like you're stringing things together, right? In a platforming sense. I hope it feels as good as it looks, because it looks like it feels great to play, right? It has that kind of very crunchy design in terms of its sound design and everything, and the animation going through like the dirt and like jumping out the other side and you know using hook shots to like grab things and then swing yourself into another piece of the earth. Yeah, I'm very interested in this game and how it feels and how it comes out. And I hope the mechanic doesn't overstay its welcome, right? Because that's the worry if you just take this one core mechanic. How do you twist it enough throughout the game to make it interesting all the way through?
Because in like Ori, it feels really fresh because it's just that one area where you do the thing, and
yeah,
obviously the water mechanic felt very similar to it because you're kind of swimming and then popping out. That's kind of what you're doing in the sand in Ori, and it worked. But yeah, I think Pepper Grinder could be really cool.
Fantastic. Pikmin 4.
That's
buddy.
my Dooku.
Qui-Gon Jinn would never join you.
That's my Bobber. Yep. We have a battle right now on Pikmin 4. Not the one you might expect. Bally, what's this Dooku nonsense here for Pikmin 4?
Maybe I'm being harsh. I just don't think this game's coming out in 2023, and
Okay.
I think that I don't like when Nintendo say, "Oh yeah, this game's coming out next year. Here's no video game footage, gameplay whatsoever." I just think it's pie in the sky when these Nintendo games take years and years and years of development, and then they think they can put out something that doesn't even include gameplay and fool us all into thinking that it's actually going to come out the following year. I personally don't buy it. However, I'm sure when the Pikmin 4 does come out, it will be very good. I just don't like that it's slated for this year when it just feels a bit false in my view.
Now, the thing is, Pikmin 4 is a game that has been in development for, 25 years, as we all know. Miyamoto on his own in a basement.
Then show us some gameplay. That's what I'm saying. If it's been in development that long, let's
he's
see
a tease, man. He's a tease. He wants to tease you out. He's just, it's what Nintendo want to do, is they want to make you fall in love with Pikmin before it fully shows itself to you. No, I'm very excited for Pikmin 4. I think Pikmin 3 was the game that got me into the series in the sense that I hadn't played them before, and I think I tried a bit of multiplayer Pikmin 2 at your house and just never really understood it and didn't really get the idea of what Pikmin was. And playing Pikmin 3 on Wii U, I was like, oh, this is a Metroid game in disguise. I didn't know that. And I think that was really what clicked for me. But also, it's such a fun world to explore. Like the whole, I have always loved, and this is, I think, why we like It Takes Two so much, is like small person in world that is big but
cool.
shrunk
cool.
down. the Toy Story factor, basically. I love that idea. I've always loved it. And so Pikmin kind of leans into that a lot. And I like that the first games kind of do real world objects and things like that. And, they imply that it's all on Earth and all that sort of stuff. And Pikmin 4, I think, has the opportunity to maybe take the series in some new directions while keeping what is so good about the core of it. And I do think it's coming out in 2023. I think that, this really is probably the last full year of games on Switch before we likely get a successor. I'm going to say hopefully next year, but who knows. But I think that this game is going to drop probably later in the year. I would imagine August, September. But I don't know, the way, I'm not too worried that Nintendo have only slightly teased it, because it feels like something they have been working on for a while, and we know that their marketing cycles have gotten shorter and shorter generally, and given how little they've shown... For the vast
majority of games, yes.
Yeah, and given how little they've shown for Zelda, and how close we are to that, like, a similar thing they could do here, which obviously Pikmin 4 only just got announced as opposed to Zelda being announced like 4 years ago, but I think that seeing the in-engine stuff made me think, like, yeah, okay, they're just teasing us here, right? There is more to that, and I think that there's a likelihood we get a full trailer at a direct early in the year, and then it comes out later in the year. I do think it is possible, and I'm very excited for it. I'd love them to put those older Pikmin games on Switch somehow, make them more accessible to people.
If GameCube came to Switch Online, Pikmin 1 and 2 would be like my first games to go to, probably.
Yes, I think
I'd
so.
want to play. I played quite a big chunk of Pikmin 2 back nearest to when it came out and enjoyed it, but I really want to go back and play 1 and 2 again.
Yeah, absolutely. Would be good ones to go into the backlog for, and yeah, Pikmin 4, I have some high hopes for Pikmin 4, so we shall see if they pan out. Another game I have high hopes for, Sea of Stars, a game that we kind of referenced at the start of this episode with Chained Echoes, of like, can it now live up to what Chained Echoes has put down on the table? And I certainly hope so. I mean, you've got Yasunori Mitsuda doing composing for this game, which is always a good thing, as well as just some of the best pixel art I've ever seen, frankly. Like, it looks stunning.
I feel like it's got the visuals over Chained Echoes. I'm a little more concerned that, judging by what you're saying about Chained Echoes mechanics, that Sea of Stars can live up to that. I think that's a very high bar to meet, and you never know. Sea of Stars might be a lot more in line with the traditional.
It could be.
When I say traditional, I mean it's obviously trying to be like Chrono Trigger, which was already reinventing a lot of traditions anyway. So
that's true. Yeah.
If it's close to that, it can probably still be very good. I'm very excited for Sea of Stars. I'd love to play it.
Yeah, I think visually it is definitely a step above Chained Echoes. I think one of the things people pointed out about Chained Echoes is when characters stand still or they're in town, they don't have idle animations. They just are static. So it's just one of those like little polished things, which I don't think really affects my enjoyment of the game. But little polished stuff like that is
cool
obviously...
when it's there. Yeah.
It's cool when it's there. And obviously this team is much bigger. They made The Messenger, and they already have a lot of experience as opposed to literally one guy making Chained Echoes. So yeah, I'm sure they can do a lot with it. And yeah, it is very directly Chrono Trigger inspired. So I think the combat will be quite similar to that. Then we have a remake of one of our favourite games back on the GameCube. It's Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life Ballet. It's coming back around. How are you feeling about this? Is it something that you'd want to go back to? Has Stardew infected us so much that we can't go back to Harvest Moon anymore?
Stardew really has like put the bar so far high and above what Harvest Moon was that I would be nervous about going back to Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life. Would there be a lot of nostalgia there? Yes. A Wonderful Life was incredibly slow paced compared to, for example, Friends of Mineral Town. And that had its own charm because it felt like the fact it was 3D, it felt like you could really just take it in a whole lot more. Like there wasn't, yes, you were watering crops, looking after animals, but they felt like quite small, maybe even quick jobs to do. And then felt like there was a lot more exploration of the town, and it was the music, the vibes, the weather, like the characters, like that town. There's just something so peaceful about it, and this game is more vibes than mechanics, arguably, for me.
100%.
Stardew Valley, as much as the vibes are great in Stardew Valley, is very mechanically superior, and that's kind of why it's so enjoyable. So I'd go into it with an open mind that is very different to Stardew Valley, but I'd be willing to try it. Obviously, all these things are in time constraints and everything, but in theory, I'd like to try it maybe.
Yeah, it's one of those things as well with a lot of these remasters. It's like, well, I've got a Steam Deck. I can just get the ROM on the Steam Deck and it will look just as good. And yeah, I don't know. The remake has a visual identity to it that doesn't quite keep with the original look of the game. I think the original look of the game is so good, and this is like slightly off that, which makes it feel a little bit of a doppelganger in a way that is uncomfortable in some ways.
Okay.
But yeah, I hope that it still retains that charm that made that first game so good, right? Like the character, I just have such good memories of like going and seeing the characters and trying to go to the farm with that one girl who I wanted to be my wife, right, every time. And yeah, I think that they did another one which was where you play as a girl in the same town, right? Like it was like a alternate version. I think Another Wonderful Life or something like that. I think this remake probably has all that stuff, all that content in there, so that's pretty good. They're remaking two of the biggest, most classic games of all time, Bally, the Suikoden games, Suikoden 1 and 2. Konami are giving them an HD remaster, and let me tell you, this looks pretty good. It has like a not fully Octopath thing going on, but they are kind of redoing all the environments and the characters and stuff, and yeah, it looks great. Suikoden is a series I've been meaning to get into for a long time, like many JRPG series, and yeah, I think this is a good excuse to do it, right? Like with Chrono Cross last year, I think that picking this up and playing this handheld would be a delight, and it's one of those that I didn't know if it was ever going to happen because Konami is stupid and bad, but they decided, hey, well, we want a bit of money, so let's just put a bit of effort into these remasters, and they look very, very good. Very, very nice to see.
They do look
them getting
nice,
some
actually.
attention.
It's a real good look.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. This is one that I had heard had got announced, but I was like, oh wait, it's actually coming out soon. And
I missed this announcement.
Had not seen the trailer, but Teslagrad 2, a game that we talked about a while ago, a long time back in the Wii U days. Game that I enjoyed quite a bit. I can't remember. Did you ever play Teslagrad?
I never got around to Teslagrad, but
okay.
I'd like to. I think you really enjoyed it and then rage quit on the final boss or something, I want to say.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I think it got very difficult towards the end. I'm pretty sure I did finish it, but it had some issues just in terms of difficulty because you literally have one hit. So you die in one hit, which was pretty brutal, I'm going to say. But the puzzle stuff was really cool. It was like a pseudo Metroidvania, but it was very linear in the sense that you would like go up the top of this tower and you would do puzzles along the way and do a little bit of combat and stuff like that. This looks pretty cool. Different main character. I think it's one of the characters from World to the West, which was the kind of like interquel game. It was like an isometric game. We played it when we went to Gamescom.
We spoke to Rain Games' CEO back at Gamescom, and he made the point that he liked the idea of making different genres of games within the same universe.
Yes,
so
exactly.
The fact that World to the West is like a top-down 2D Zelda, and then this is obviously like 2D Metroidvania platformy, but same universe, I think that's quite cool. I'd like to see more things do that.
Yeah, it's like the SteamWorld games, right? Like it's a similar idea of
totally.
all taking place within the same space, but different games. So that's cool. I'm glad that's coming out. Then we have, I think, probably one of the most anticipated games on our end, the Plucky Squire, Bally.
That's my Boba.
Yep.
There you go.
I think I've also said Boba and Boba.
Yeah.
I've rarely reacted to a trailer as hyped as this trailer, and for anyone wanting to know what I'm talking about, just YouTube like the Plucky Squire and you will be pleasantly, if you like anything to do with Nintendo games and this sort of thing, it's a pretty special trailer.
I remember because I was watching the Devolver Direct and you were doing whatever because you didn't want to watch all the conferences. And as soon as this happened, I'm like, Bally, just don't look at the internet. You need to just click this link, watch this. Don't get spoiled on this thing. I need you to see this. So I tried to get that to you as spoiler-free as possible as soon as I could, basically. Because it's a hell of a trailer.
I mean, what was wild was the trailer starts and it's just like this really, I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's like this, you're in a book and then the character's running around in the book. I was like, oh, nice one, MBZ. This is such a great art style. Thanks for saying me this trailer. And then he pops out of the goddamn book and then there's a 3D platformer all of a sudden. He's walking around. Again, it's a kind of like small guy in a large world.
Yes, exactly.
Toy thing again. And God, it looks good. We should not judge games by their trailers. I mentioned Sports Story earlier in the show.
Very true.
That's a cracking trailer and a woeful game. So, yeah, I don't want to get too hopeful. And again, maybe it probably won't come out this year. The Plucky Squire games like this seem to just live in the ether for 4 or 5 years and then eventually come out. But you never know. It might come out this year and it looks fantastic.
It absolutely does, and I am very excited for it. My only concern is it won't come out this year. It feels like it might need a bit more development time, so happy to have that happen. And it is the James Turner who was the kind of lead artist on Pokemon for a while, so you can see where that pedigree comes from. Very, very strong pedigree. The last game on our list is a little cooking game, a little Indian cooking game called Venba, that I think is delightful and think has, that kind of charm. There's a category of indie games that are just like very light on gameplay but very heavy on charm. Stuff like A Little to the Left or Unpacking. Like this feels like it fits into that space of cozy
art style.
Cooking, beautiful art style, like very, very, very distinctive, and showing a group of people who are never very represented in games, which is the Indian subcontinent, right? And I think it's it's cool that it's almost like a what's the word? A diaspora kind of game, because it's set in Canada, so they're not like in India. It's like a like I Am Diaspora, Indian living in the UK, from a different background, right, cultural background. But I think it's very cool to see that represented in games, and I like the look of this thing quite a lot. So I'm interested in the story it tells and how it kind of approaches all those topics.
Are the developers Canadian Indian?
Yes, I believe at least one of them on the team is,
Cool.
which is very cool. So very much looking forward to that game as well. So yeah, a lot of games, a lot of stuff coming out on Switch, and I'm sure there'll be even more announced during Nintendo Directs and other things happening. So, we've got one email here, Bally, which we can quickly go through from Chariot Goblin, just talking about Nintendo's lineup specifically. And Chariot Goblin says, "Hey, TNL, as of writing, we only know of 5 games Nintendo is publishing in 2023. Fire Emblem Engage, Kirby's Return to Dreamland DX, Bayonetta Origins, Tears of the Kingdom, and Pikmin 4. Which one are you most anticipating? Which one do you think will sell the least?" Very interesting. It's a very weird assortment. It's like 3 pretty big games and then 2 games that are like a little bit less important, I would say. But Bally, where are you sitting? What's your most anticipated game?
Easily Tears of the Kingdom. Following that, definitely Pikmin 4. And then, honestly, after that, like, I'm not interested in the other 3. If Fire Emblem gets really good reviews and does a lot of the strategic GBA stuff and eliminates a lot of the more calendar related stuff, then I'd be interested in trying that later in the year. I imagine time constraints, I doubt that will happen, but I probably think that Bayonetta will sell the least. I don't know what you think.
Ooh, okay, interesting.
Well, Pikmin 4 will sell the least because it's coming out next year, but yeah.
Oh, okay, there you go. There's trick question. My most anticipated is actually Fire Emblem right now, just because we're so close. I've been on YouTube looking up like GBA ROM hacks of Fire Emblem games, Bally. I've been like,
because you like Three Houses more than me, but it's for you. It wasn't like near your top. It wasn't anywhere near your top tier of Fire Emblem games. It's
probably like around the top 5, maybe I would say.
It gets into the top 5.
It might be like 6 or something. Okay. I'm not sure. I have to think about it more. The thing is, Three Houses has some of the best character writing in the whole franchise. Like it's so a level above from so many of the other games. Like the story also has like good twists to it. Like the writing for the plot and the characters is probably the best in the series overall. So like it actually wins out on that level. It's just the tactics for me were just a bit basic and not very interesting. I could sleepwalk my way through Three Houses pretty much, right? So I was kind of looking for a bit more tactical challenge. And at the end of the day, as great as the character writing and stuff is, Fire Emblem is a series where I'm there for the tactics more than anything, and so a return to form with Engage is getting me very excited, and I'm really itching. I want to play it so bad. So that is my number 1 actually at the moment. Then followed by Tears of the Kingdom, and then Pikmin 4 would be my number 3. I think. I'd probably put Kirby last, Bayonetta at number 4, just because Kirby's just a re-release of a game that I've never had that much interest in playing in the first place. So I'm more curious about what Bayonetta Origins is than playing Kirby's Return to Dreamland. So that's kind of how I would rank them. Which one will sell the least? I think, you're right. I do think it is Bayonetta, isn't it? It's likely Bayonetta, because the thing with Kirby is like, it's a re-release of an old Wii game. But it's Kirby, and people buy Kirby games, right? Like, there's something about it that it's more casual. It fits that big, wide audience of Switch fans. I think Kirby will outsell Bayonetta, but it's kind of it's a tight race there. It depends how good Bayonetta is, but Bayonetta 3 already is a niche franchise, is a niche thing to get into. So a spin-off of a niche franchise, I think is likely going to be the worst selling one. But in terms of the best, obviously Zelda's number one. I think then Fire Emblem, actually. I think Fire Emblem sells better than Pikmin 4, if I'm honest. Like, we're at a point where Fire Emblem has built up enough reputation that it's taken a B slot from Pikmin 4. I think Pikmin is now a C tier series in terms of sales for Nintendo. Mainly because they've just not done anything with it for years, so it just doesn't have the audience or the fan base to engage with it. So I think Pikmin 4 is actually selling the next... You know what? Kirby might sell better than Pikmin 4, which is sad. Yeah. But it could be possible.
I think Pikmin will do pretty well, actually, and I think it's its opportunity to try and get back into Nintendo's B tier, potentially. And is Pikmin 4, is it the first game that had a re-release from Wii U, so Pikmin 3 obviously, and then got its own sequel on Switch? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a handful of games came out as like an experiment. For example, Tropical Freeze came out. We've not seen another DK platformer since. So, like, is Pikmin 4 the first example of, like, we tried redoing the Wii U port, and now the Wii U port sold well enough that we're happy to make a new game in that series, you know? So
yeah, I think
it's
it might
good to see.
Yeah, it is good for sure. So glad to see it. Happy that Pikmin 4 is coming and is happening. But yeah, there you go. Lovely. Well, I think we've done enough yapping about the year and everything coming out. It's going to be a good one, I think, and lots of interesting things to be chatting about and discussing. And we're going to get on out of here. Before we go, let's give a reminder to everybody that that survey is going to be live as soon as this show goes live. So if you have some time, go ahead and fill it out. It'll be linked in as many places as possible on our Twitter account, Discord, in the very show notes of this episode. So just click it and just take a few minutes of your time to answer our questions. We also, Bally, have some folks to thank for supporting us on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are Zach S., Thomas, Matthew, Albert, and Wicked Gamer UK Allen. And we should also give a big thanks to our new patrons. They are John H. and Sullivan C. And we should also mention that Matthew S., $10 tier patron, increased their patronage. So huge thank you to Matthew S. for your increased patronage and your support. But thank you to all of our other patrons. We are really creeping towards 50, so I'm really hoping we can get there soon. It'd be awesome to get to 50 patrons. That feels like a nice round number, but thank you all for your support. And as MZ mentioned at the top of the show, the $5 tier is a little bit different now. We're going to do, well, we weren't doing much before with it, and now we are putting sort of random things here and there interspersed.
Stuff will happen.
As MZ mentioned, he's already put out his top 10 video game songs of 2022, but that was for all patrons, but in future that kind of thing will go to $5 tier.
Absolutely, yeah, just to give you a bit of a taste of what we might be doing.
And we did do our non-tender predictions for the year for January. That was our Patreon show, so highly recommend checking that out for $1.
For sure. You can, of course, find us in various places around the internet. On twitter.com, you can go and find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Beautiful. You can engage with the show in various different ways. You can find us on YouTube. We're on Discord as well. Join the community on Discord. We're currently doing our big fantasy critic league, which is basically picking games and trying to be a good publisher, essentially, is the game.
Basically doing MBZ's job for him. That's like kind of what we're doing.
Doing my job for fun. Yeah,
Since he's had that job, he's done much better at fantasy critic, which is very interesting.
Yes, I might have some cheat codes in some senses, but it's a good, fun thing to do, and we've been having a lot of chat about that in the Discord, so if you want to join the Discord and chat with some folks about video games, that is a good thing to do. It's in the description of the show.
We're going to talk about fancy critic and bonus bits in a minute.
We will,
as well.
Yes. You can find the show in various places. We're on Spotify, we are on Stitcher. You can download us in any podcasting app that you have. Just searching for This Nintendo Life, and you can download us, and it's great and lovely and fun, and you don't have to remember to go find the show. It just automatically is there, like magic, one should say. So go ahead and support us and follow us on those places. That's it. I think that's the show. I don't know. Don't have anything prophetic to say here, Bally.
It does feel weird to be in 2023 and to be talking about all these games coming this year, and to be in a year where 3D Zelda is coming out. Like that is
more special.
Tempting fate. Like that is special time. Do you remember where and when you were, just before the Switch came out, Breath of the Wild? Like, that was a special moment.
I think I can remember. I have memories of when every single 3D Zelda that I'm cognizant of came out, right? Like, I have strong memories of going to Ali T's house on the eve of the Wii.
Your Wii got delayed.
I didn't get a Wii because my parents weren't able to get one, and then I got one the next day and it was all good. But I remember sitting there and Ali T wanting to play Twilight Princess, and me and you being like, play that on your own time, Ali T. We want to play Replay. My first memory of Twilight Princess is us telling Ali T to go away, and we played Replay instead. And then Skyward Sword, I was at uni, and I remember that it was a special day because 3D Land and Skyward Sword came out on the same day. So I went down to the receptionist and got both of them, and then just like played them all night, basically just going between the two. It was great. And then with Breath of the Wild, I was also at uni, but I was in a flat and waiting for it to be delivered to that flat, and didn't have lectures that day, and was like just the game and the Switch were arriving separately. So I remember the game coming through the post box and me being like just staring at it, being like, okay, can't do anything with this yet. Have to wait for the actual Switch to get here. And then the Switch came like a couple of hours later. So there's a couple of hours of me just staring at a box for a while. So yeah, pretty strong memories of all of those. And
I remember buying my Switch in Brussels and then just going back to my flat and playing it. And I remember me and Caroline had just kind of started going out a few months before, and I'd warned her of this moment when we started going out. I was like, I'm not going to be able to hang out and she was like, that's fine. A friend was visiting her, and then I just locked myself away while she was out with her friend visiting, and I joined them later and remember telling them about how incredible this game was. Like, this is the best thing ever. So yeah,
very special indeed. Well, I'm sure we'll make more memories with more Zelda when it comes out this year. Looking forward to it. All right, well, thanks everyone for listening. We will see you next time with another show. Until then, bye bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's show was the battle theme from Chained Echoes, copyright Matthias Linder, 2022.